41 years ago, a 2-year-old boy vanished from the backyard of a small house in Yuma, Arizona, on a scorching summer afternoon, disappearing without a trace, leaving his family shattered and the entire town gripped by fear and confusion. Authorities suspected a blonde woman, who had been seen driving around the neighborhood beforehand, might be involved, but no evidence was found, and the investigation quickly stalled. Yet, through all those years, the boy's desperate mother never gave up hope, clinging to the belief that her son was still alive somewhere out there. Then one day, when genetic genealogy technology was brought into the investigation, an unexpected DNA match revealed a crucial detail that everyone had overlooked. A detail that would completely change the entire case and shock the whole country. Before we dive deep into this emotional and unbelievable story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you love cold cases solved after decades, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. Summer of 1984, the town of Yuma, Arizona, still had a slow, quiet pace in the middle of the desert. Palm-lined streets, old wooden fences, and the morning weather report on the radio were the familiar sights of North 12th Street, where the Bryant family lived. Tom Bryant, 29, a mechanic who worked in the small garage behind the house, was a calm, quiet man who always came home on time. Eileen, 24, worked the morning shift at the local grocery store. She was careful, attentive, and almost never left the kids alone for long. They had 2 children, Beth, 8 years old, quick and curious, and Benjamin, a 2-year-old blond boy with lively brown eyes, who was always running around the lawn, clutching his red plastic toy. Life in that single-story house was steady and simple. Pancakes and coffee for breakfast. Tom checking engines, Eileen folding laundry, Beth watching her little brother in the early sun. In the small neighborhood, everyone knew each other. Doors were rarely locked. Kids played along the sidewalks, and every now and then the mail truck kicked up a thin cloud of dust. But in recent weeks, a few neighbors had mentioned an old silver pickup that kept showing up at odd hours, crawling slowly down the side streets before disappearing. The driver was a blonde woman wearing sunglasses, who rarely looked directly at anyone. The whole block figured she was probably a delivery driver or lost. No one called the police because nothing clearly suspicious stood out. Eileen had caught a glimpse of the truck once while taking out the trash, but then forgot about it. On the afternoon of June 14th, the air was stifling. The thermometer on the porch read over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Tom was in the garage, the steady clang of tools ringing out. Eileen was washing dishes in the kitchen, with the door cracked open for any hint of a breeze. Beth and Benjamin were playing in the yard, lining up toy cars on the dirt. Around 3:30, Beth ran inside to grab a new toy, a plastic doll their mom had just bought. When she came back out, the yard was empty. The toy cars were still lined up neatly. The gate was ajar, no footsteps, no crying. Eileen heard her daughter call out, rushed outside, looked around. Benjamin was gone. She ran to the neighbor next door, asked quickly, then across the street, calling his name along the fence. Tom heard the commotion, dropped his tools, and came running to the street, scanning both directions. Nothing but glaring sun and desert dust. They started splitting up, walking the block, knocking on every door, asking if anyone had seen a 2-year-old in a blue shirt and striped shorts. An old lady said she'd seen the silver truck drive by about half an hour earlier, but didn't notice which way it went. A young guy said he heard an engine fading toward the main road. Nothing solid. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Eileen's voice grew hoarse from calling his name in vain. Beth stood by the fence, clutching her brother's toy, tears streaming down her face. Tom checked the neighboring yards, behind bushes, the dry ditches. No trace. When they came back to the yard, the sun had softened a little, but the silence was thick. Eileen stared at the open gate, hot wind blowing sand across the road. Her hands shaking, she picked up the phone on the table and dialed the local police. Her first words caught in her throat, "My son is missing." The 911 dispatcher at the Yuma County Center logged the call. Female caller, panicked, address North 12th Street, north side of town. The signal was located and dispatched to the nearest patrol unit, code 421. At exactly 4:15 p.m., the first police car turned onto the quiet street, red lights flashing off the white walls. Two officers stepped out and told everyone to stay where they were. Eileen stood in the middle of the yard, shirt soaked with sweat, face blank with shock. Tom ran from the garage, hands still greasy. The officers separated them and took basic information: names, exact time they noticed the child was gone, description of clothing, and last known actions. A verbal report went out over the radio. Child, male, approximately 2 years old, light blonde hair, blue shirt, striped shorts, missing over 30 minutes, direction unknown. Meanwhile, neighbors gathered along the fence, some silent, some whispering. Lieutenant Michael Keene, the shift commander, arrived to take charge of the scene. He ordered the entire block in front of the Bryant house sealed off, placed reflective cones, and temporarily blocked vehicle access. While the sun still blazed, he walked the yard, examining every detail: scattered plastic toys, small footprints near the fence, faint tire marks near the gate. Keene jotted notes on his clipboard and marked spots with white chalk. No signs of a struggle, nothing broken, but he could feel something was wrong. The sudden silence didn't match a normal play area. Inside the house, Eileen was led to the kitchen table, where a glass of water sat untouched, and a dish towel still hung from her hand. Beth sat beside her, eyes red and swollen, repeatedly asking when the police would find her brother. Tom was questioned separately, repeating his afternoon, working in the garage, hearing the kids playing, then his wife's cries, less than 10 minutes between the two moments. Police noted, no direct witnesses, estimated time of disappearance, 15:30, 15:35. Another unit was called in to set up a temporary 1-mile search radius around the house. The fire department was contacted to prepare floodlights and generators for night searching. In the patrol car, an officer typed the first description: male, 2 years old, Caucasian, light blonde hair, brown eyes, approx. 34 inches tall, 27 pounds. Clothing: light blue t-shirt, blue and white striped shorts, barefoot. The description was copied and sent to all patrol units in the area. By 5:05 p.m., officers began knocking on every nearby door. A woman, at number 45, said she saw a silver pickup, older model, maybe Ford or Chevy, driving slowly down the street. About half an hour earlier, heading toward Highway 95. A man at the end of the block heard a weak engine that seemed to stop and then accelerate, but he didn't pay attention. Both statements were recorded and flagged needs verification. A team swept the dry canals behind the row of houses, checked low bushes, and the abandoned lots where kids played. Nothing. At the same time, Lieutenant Keene ordered a scene diagram, photos of the entire front yard, and documentation of every item's position and the gate. A reflective cone was placed at the suspected tire mark, yellow tape strung around the fence. On the road, faint dust tracks were marked with 3 white paint dots. As dusk fell, police lights reflected off neighboring windows, red and blue flashing across the Bryant house walls. Radio chatter, boots on gravel, pens clicking on clipboards filled the heavy air. At 6:40 p.m., an official alert went out countywide: missing child, case #840717, Benjamin Bryant, male, 2 years old, last seen North 12th Street, Yuma. An electronic file was created with initial data, time of report, victim description, preliminary statements, first witnesses. Lieutenant Keene signed the scene preservation log and noted plans for overnight watch. Under the floodlights, Eileen's shadow stretched long across the empty lawn. She leaned against the doorframe, staring at the fluttering reflective tape, while patrol cars continued circling the block, searchlights sweeping every corner as night fell. Around 6 a.m. the next morning, the first desert sunlight hit the pavement as the Yuma Police Department's forensic team arrived at the scene. The white van pulled up to house number 42, still cordoned off from the night before. Lieutenant Michael Keene, who had been there since early, handed over the overnight report to the forensics team. The neighborhood was dead silent, only a few neighbors watched from a distance. The reflective tape was reinforced, restricting an estimated 40 square meter area around the front yard, wooden fence, walkway to the gate, and part of the road edge. Forensic team leader, Raymond Holt, designated 3 anchor points. The southwest corner of the fence, the road where tire marks were visible, and the empty lot next to the garage. A 1/100 scale map was spread on the van hood, marking planned evidence collection points. At 7:12 a.m., panoramic photography began. Lenses captured every tiny detail: flip-flop prints, tree shadows, positions of plastic toys. Holt ordered everything left untouched during measurements. One technician knelt by the gate, where Keene had chalked the night before. Beneath the fine sand appeared 2 parallel tracks about 1.6 meters long, 1.2 meters apart, matching the wheelbase of a small pickup. They used an angle ruler and compass to measure the track's direction relative to the road, 15 degrees north, indicating a sharp turn toward the highway. The tracks were fresh, edges deeply compressed, suggesting a vehicle weight of about 3 tons. Soil samples were collected with a steel scoop into 3 vials labeled E40 784, Soil Track North Gate. 1 went to the lab, 2 were sealed. Inside the fence, another technician found a pale yellow fabric fiber about 2 centimeters long, caught on a low wooden slat, fibers torn. Holt picked it up with tweezers, placed it in a nylon bag, sealed and labeled E40 784, Pake-style fiber. Visual inspection showed it didn't match any clothing from the Bryant family. Only white, blue, and light floral fabrics were noted inside the house. Holt ordered macro photos and noted the position 38 centimeters off the ground, right by the gate hinge. Nearby, they scanned with UV light, but found no bodily fluids or blood. On the east lawn, another technician swept with a metal detector, only an old bottle cap and rusty nail. No foreign objects or dropped items. In the yard, Benjamin's toys remained untouched. 2 plastic cars, an upside-down building block, lightly dusted overnight. Holt measured the distance from the toys to the gate, 5.4 meters, and sketched it on the map. No skid marks, no adult footprints. His preliminary conclusion: no signs of struggle at scene, no drag marks or broken items. Child most likely left position by walking voluntarily or being carried. During the survey, patrol officers blocked the main road 2 blocks away to keep curious residents back. Raymond Holt continued examining the strip of dirt along the curb, where desert wind had deposited fresh sand. A faint circular mark about 6 inches in diameter was found, possibly a rubber sole, but too blurred for casting. The technician only photographed it and noted possible partial print, inconclusive. By 9:10 a.m., the entire area had been dusted and samples collected. At the west fence, they recovered a short brown hair stuck to a wooden knot, gender undetermined, labeled E4784C hair fragment. No additional fibers or blood signs. After collection, the team measured the whole area and drew a detailed large format scene map: north-south orientation, toy positions, tire tracks, sample points, and fence boundaries. Everything was photographed on 35mm film, rolls #15/23. In the report, Raymond Holt wrote, "Scene intact, undisturbed. Primary evidence consists of small pickup tire tracks and unknown yellow fiber. No blood, no struggle marks. Preliminary conclusion: cause of disappearance undetermined, abduction not ruled out." At 10:25 a.m., the survey was complete. Evidence was transferred to sealed storage boxes and handed to Lieutenant Michael Keene's office. He signed receipt, along with 3 witnesses, 2 technicians, and 1 patrol officer. As the forensic van pulled away, the neighborhood fell quiet again, only the yellow tape swaying in the sun. The little Bryant house became the center of the investigation map, pinned to the wall of the temporary war room at the police station, the focal point of an unsolved missing child case, officially logged that morning as E4784. Field Report Yuma District. At noon, the same day, after forensics finished collecting and transferring evidence, Lieutenant Michael Keene signed the order activating Tactical Search Operation. Bryant case at Priority Level 1. Mobilizing all local rescue units and area police. A neighborhood map was spread on a folding table in the Bryant yard. A red circle 5 miles in diameter, marking the initial search radius. 6 teams were assigned routes by compass direction, each with 3 officers, 1 rescuer, and 1 local volunteer. A temporary command post was set up in Patrol Unit 421, linked by internal radio to county dispatch. At 12:40 p.m., the first search party began checking the empty land to the west, where dry irrigation canals ran parallel toward Highway 95. Fire units provided water trucks for cooling, while patrol teams walked line abreast, planting flags at checked locations. To the east, the second team inspected abandoned warehouses near the old rail line. Locked steel doors were cut open, inside only dust, old bike tire marks, and animal droppings. A technician scanned the area with a thermal imager. Negative. In the north sector, the third team worked with 8 civilian volunteers, sweeping sand dunes and low hills bordering the industrial zone in a straight line 2 meters apart. Temperatures climbed above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, forcing short rotation breaks for water and map updates. By 2:10 p.m., 2 K9 units from Phoenix arrived, 4 bloodhounds scented from Benjamin's clothing taken from the house. They started in the front yard, followed the path to the gate, and paused at the road where tire tracks had been documented. 1 dog turned north, the other 3 went straight to the highway, then lost the trail near the desert turnoff. Initial report, probable direction, north-northeast, scent lost at milepost 47. At the same time, a county rescue helicopter began circling the area with an infrared camera scanning ground and canals. Only small animals and vehicles on the highway registered heat. No human trace or dropped objects. At 3:45 p.m., the southern team extended the search to abandoned land bordering the dry Gila River bed, rough terrain with low brush and deep cracks. They advanced in single file with pry bars and flashlights. 1 volunteer spotted something shiny under the sand, but digging revealed only broken bottle glass. Police marked the spot to avoid repeat searches. The sun dropped. Desert wind shifted, covering everything in red dust. Over the radio, commanders continuously reported, no signs of entry, no personal items, no children's clothing, no additional tire tracks. At 5:20 p.m., Dane held a quick briefing at command, decided to expand the search radius another mile north, prioritizing the road to the old reservoir. A unit with small inflatable boats scanned the reservoir surface, only floating trash. All teams reported negative. By 6:45 p.m., disk fell, and visibility dropped sharply. The rescue chief recommended suspending for safety. Keene agreed, ordered every checked point marked with wooden stakes and reflective tape, noting date and time. Teams regrouped, submitted coordinates, participant counts, and routes covered. By day's end, over 40 people had searched 12 square miles with no significant findings. A summary sheet was printed on site, Day 1 search summary, 0 findings. As the last light faded, only helicopter floodlights swept the sand, glinting off the yellow tape around the Bryant house. Keene signed the suspension log at 19:58. Final note: search operation suspended due to nightfall. Resume 06:00 tomorrow. The remaining personnel packed gear, dogs were loaded back into vehicles, and the little street on North 12th Street sank back into silence. Only the blinking red light of the patrol car reflecting off the wooden fence, where the gate still hung slightly open, marking the end of a day of fruitless searching. On the morning of the 3rd day after the emergency search yielded no results, on-scene Commander Michael Keene received orders from the sheriff's office to shift the investigation toward internal family factors in the Bryant household. Per protocol, every unsolved missing child case that passes the 72-hour mark is automatically classified as investigative priority, family inclusion. A temporary interview room was set up inside Yuma PD headquarters. Tom and Eileen were asked to come in at 9 a.m., scheduled separately. The narrow room carried the heavy smell of paper and cold coffee. On the table, Keene placed in front of Tom the interview form titled Interview 1, Parent Missing Juvenile Case #840717. He asked Tom to recount the entire afternoon of June 14th in chronological order: the time he was working in the garage, sounds heard, who was present, who came and went. Tom spoke in the same flat tone, insisting he had heard no strange vehicles or engines near the house, only a few instances of dogs barking. Officers noted the time of each milestone and cross-checked it against the initial statement. They then moved to questions about finances, debts, insurance policies, or marital conflicts. Tom handed over copies of utility bills, pay stubs, and tax documents. Everything was stable, and there was no life insurance policy on the child. When asked about any prior trouble with the law, he mentioned only a traffic ticket 3 years earlier. By the end of the morning session, nothing appeared suspicious. Eileen was brought in during the afternoon. She wore a light blue blouse, had visibly lost weight, and had deep-set eyes. The interview was conducted by 2 female officers and a note-taker. Questions focused on family relationships, level of child supervision, and times Benjamin had been out of sight. Eileen described her son's routine in detail. He napped from noon until 2 p.m., then usually went to play in the yard with his sister. When asked about financial or emotional stress, she simply shook her head and said everything was normal. Police compared the wall clock in the home against the 911 call time stamp, 4-minute discrepancy, not enough to affect the timeline. Eileen's medical records were requested from Yuma Regional Medical Center. No history of depression or psychiatric treatment. Meanwhile, a separate team examined the garage where Tom had been working. They cataloged tools, positions, oil samples, and inspected the concrete floor for any signs of cleanup. Everything was clean, no blood or signs of struggle. The interim report stated, no forensic evidence suggesting household involvement. That same evening, Keene held a team briefing and reviewed all documents. A detailed timeline was pinned to the wall, 1530. Benjamin last seen, 1533. Beth enters the house, 1535. Eileen steps into the yard, 1607. 911 call placed. A total gap of approximately 37 minutes between the last sighting and the emergency call. This period was labeled the gap window. The parents' statements were compared, nearly identical on almost every point, with only a minor difference regarding Beth's exact position when Eileen ran outside. But it did not alter the timeline. At the county sheriff's investigative office, the preliminary report was forwarded, along with financial checks verified by the accounting unit. The family had no debt, no property disputes, no legal conflicts. A psychologist consulted to observe reactions during the interviews concluded. Natural stress response, no indicators of deception or concealment. By the 4th day, investigators widened the net to relationships outside the home. Neighbors, acquaintances, Tom's garage friends, and Eileen's co-workers at the convenience store. No one reported conflicts or unusual behavior in the weeks leading up to the incident. A mutual friend mentioned Tom had talked about repairing the back fence to make it safer for the kids, indicating genuine parental concern. The crime lab received results on soil and fiber samples collected earlier. Origin undetermined, but confirmed not to match clothing or items from the Bryant home. The only potentially relevant trace remained the small truck tire track. In his June 18 report, Michael Keene wrote briefly, all Bryant household members temporarily cleared of suspicion. He recommended shifting focus to external factors, including any strangers previously observed in the area. Late that afternoon, as he signed the consolidated file, Keene stared at the wall map covered in red pins and strings radiating from house number 42. The epicenter of the disappearance. He knew every piece of evidence within those 4 walls had been thoroughly examined, yet the answer lay beyond them. At 1930, he closed the temporary file and marked the transition to the next phase in bold capital letters. Internal investigation concluded, no domestic involvement established. 2 days after the internal investigation was closed and the temporary file shifted to external leads, police received a call from a man named Harold Kane, resident of the East Side Yuma neighborhood, approximately 2 miles from the Bryant home. He reported that on the afternoon of June 14, within the same time frame as the disappearance, he saw an older silver Ford F-150 pickup driving slowly along Sandhill Road, the direct connector to North 12th Street. According to Kane, it was an extended cab model with a dark tarp covering the bed, driven by a thin blonde woman wearing large sunglasses and a white shirt. He said the image stuck in his memory because the truck was moving unusually slowly, almost stopping in front of his gate before turning right. He clearly recalled the rough engine sound typical of late 1970s models. The report was received at 8 a.m. on June 20th and marked Lead 004, possible vehicle sighting. Michael Keene immediately dispatched a team to interview the witness in person. Kane, age 53, was a retired electrician living alone with no criminal record or known mental health issues. His statement remained consistent across retellings. Technicians took him to the described route to pinpoint the exact location. He pointed west, about 2 blocks from the Bryant house, where he saw the truck make a U-turn. A faint tire impression was still visible in the old sand, though mostly covered by desert wind. Police photographed it and marked the spot on the area map. Kane's description matched scattered earlier neighbor reports of a silver pickup, blonde woman. For the first time, investigators had a relatively clear suspect vehicle description. Lieutenant Keene ordered a full list of every Ford F-150, 1975, 1979, registered in the 3 counties of Yuma, La Paz, and Imperial, more than 700 records in total. A 4-person team was assigned to review each plate, owner, and address. They narrowed it to 68 vehicles painted silver or light gray, of which 19 were registered to households containing women aged 30-45. This short list was forwarded to the Criminal Investigation Division for cross-checking against records of prior abductions, violence, or mental health commitments. Over 3 days, no matches were found. Several flagged vehicles were physically checked, out-of-state plates, or owners confirmed to be outside the area on the day of the incident. One vehicle in La Paz had received a parking ticket on June 13, proving the owner was 150 miles away. Cases were eliminated one by one. An officer suggested expanding the search to scrapyards, as the truck might have been sold for parts or abandoned. Patrol units checked 6 metal recycling facilities in the county. None had a matching silver F-150. Concurrently, Keene ordered the crime lab to compare the tire track collected at the Bryant gate with the state tire tread database. The pattern was worn all-terrain 70s, common on 1976, 1978 light-duty Ford trucks, but also used by many other manufacturers, making exact identification impossible. The June 23 lab report noted, consistent but not unique, cannot confirm vehicle make or model. Though unsatisfied, Keene logged every detail. A second formal interview with Harold Kane confirmed the stability of his account. He placed the sighting between approximately 15:20 and 15:25, just minutes before Beth Bryant went inside, aligning almost perfectly with the gap window. Kane added that he noticed something reflective behind the windshield, possibly an interior-hung registration tag instead of an exterior plate, an uncommon but unconfirmable detail. The supplemental report stated, observation credible, recommend catalog as indirect evidence. New witness flyers were printed and distributed around Sandhill and North 12th Street, including the vehicle description and a police sketch artist rendering of the driver based on Kane's description. Angular face, lightly curly hair, large sunglasses, long-sleeve white shirt. Flyers were posted at gas stations, auto shops, and post offices. Over the following week, 3 additional tips came in, but none matched the time or route, and no caller recognized the truck or woman. By June 27, The three-county registry sweep was closed. No plates, no registrations matched. Keene noted in his log, lead inconclusive, vehicle possibly out of state or unregistered. Harold Kane's statement was archived as indirect evidence, along with the observation map and composite sketch. All materials were bound into a separate subfile numbered #840717L4 vehicle lead, silver F-150, female driver, unidentified, and placed in the master Bryant case file pending future corroborating data. After the three-county search produced no matches, Lieutenant Michael Keene proposed expanding to an inter-county operation in direct coordination with La Paz County to the north and Imperial County, California, to the west. On June 30th, regional coordination search, Bryant case was approved, with the objective of verifying possible escape routes used to leave Arizona within 24 hours of the disappearance. Patrol units from all three counties met at Yuma Central Station and agreed on real-time data sharing for suspicious plates, unregistered vehicles, and drivers matching the description. Temporary traffic checkpoints were established on the three primary exits: Interstate 8 toward San Diego, Highway 95 north to Parker, and State Route 80 toward Tucson. Each checkpoint had 2 patrol units, recording cameras, and logbooks, with special attention to older silver extended cab pickups with covered beds. During the first 3 days, hundreds of vehicles were stopped, mostly farm or construction trucks, with nothing suspicious. A July 3rd summary report recorded no positive identification, 217 vehicles verified. At the same time, Imperial County authorities forwarded information about an unidentified vehicle fire in the Welton Desert area, approximately 45 miles east of Yuma. Railroad workers reported smoke and burning plastic at 6:15 a.m. Local fire crews extinguished the blaze and discovered a completely burned pickup frame, originally silver, reduced to chassis and rear axle only. The bed shape and frame structure matched late 1970s Ford F-150s. The information was immediately sent to Keene, who arrived on scene that afternoon. All that remained was blackened metal and melted tires. VIN plate and license plates were destroyed. Imperial County Forensics, working with Yuma techs, collected ash samples and tested for accelerant residue. Preliminary findings indicated the fire occurred at least 4 days earlier and was intentionally set. Keene ordered recovery of any remaining readable frame sections for the stamped VIN. After hours of cleaning soot, partial VIN 8F07H183412 was recovered, sufficient for a database search of older vehicles. Results showed the truck was registered to Mark L. Peterson of Blythe, California, who had reported it stolen on June 10. 4 days before Benjamin Bryant vanished, Peterson had parked it overnight in front of his house. It was gone by morning with no witnesses. Blythe PD had filed a theft report, but never located the vehicle until this discovery. Timing and vehicle type aligned, but direct linkage to the Yuma case remained unproven. Technicians searched the surrounding area for footprints, clothing, or fabric remnants. Only scattered metal scraps and burnt tarp pieces were found, yielding no DNA or hair. Ash samples confirmed gasoline as the accelerant. A 500-meter radius search found only fire department tire tracks and small animal prints. Imperial County documented the scene and transferred the file to Yuma under code vehicle burn, Welton site hash W071984. The official conclusion read, VIN verified, vehicle previously reported stolen. No biological trace found, no link established to Bryant case. Keene ordered full copies added to the master file as an excluded lead. At the July 5 coordination meeting, he explained that although model, color, and general timing matched, physical evidence did not support connection. No fingerprint, no DNA, no registration overlap. La Paz and Imperial units continued checking leads through the weekend with no new developments. The checkpoint system operated 2 additional days before standing down. The final summary of the inter-county operation recorded 356 vehicles inspected, 14 related reports filed, 1 burned vehicle excluded, no new physical evidence located. All data was entered into Yuma County's central file under sub-number #84017AXT/Welton. With Keene's closing notation on the report, regional search completed. Vehicle evidence inconclusive, no trace of missing subject. The consolidated inter-county search results report submitted to the Yuma County Sheriff's Office on July 6 showed that the entire coordinated effort among agencies had produced no significant progress. Lieutenant Michael Keene noted in the report, inter-county communication structure remains fragmented, lacking real-time data sharing procedures. When the debrief meeting was held that same afternoon, representatives from La Paz, Imperial, and Yuma counties all acknowledged that the current information exchange system still relied on telephones and fax machines with no shared data link. Each sheriff's department maintained separate records, stored on paper, resulting in duplication and delays in processing information. Data such as suspicious license plates, witness descriptions, or vehicles requiring verification had to be manually copied and sent through inter-office mail, taking an average of 24 to 48 hours to reach another agency. During that time, all physical traces at the scene had already been obscured by the harsh desert weather. Keene observed, there is no central mechanism to ensure counties update a single vehicle list, so each agency essentially starts from scratch. This delay meant leads about the silver pickup truck and the blonde woman were not verified in time, creating a critical gap in the initial days, the period considered decisive in child abduction cases. At that time, no statewide community alert system existed. The Amber Alert program would not be implemented until the mid-1990s. Therefore, when the Bryant case occurred, there was no mechanism to broadcast emergency information to gas stations, toll booths, or nearby neighborhoods. All notifications had to be done manually through local radio stations or flyers. Internal statistics showed that flyers describing the suspect vehicle reached only 60% of areas within a 5-mile radius after 3 days, whereas under modern standards such information should be disseminated within the first 2 hours. The Yuma Police Department also lacked authority to automatically expand the investigation across state lines due to jurisdictional limits. For federal assistance, the case had to meet one of 3 criteria: a confirmed suspect crossing state lines, physical evidence of interstate criminal activity, or a special request from state judicial authorities. The Bryant case met none of these. Lacking clear evidence of abduction, the case remained at the county level, allowing only informal coordination with neighboring agencies. The Federal Investigative Agency received a summary but did not open its own file. Inside the Yuma County Sheriff's Office, personnel allocation was also problematic. The forensics team had only 2 people handling evidence analysis, while patrol units had to split shifts between the Bryant case and other incidents. Searches after the 10th day were interrupted due to lack of funding and vehicles. Michael Keene repeatedly requested additional manpower, but was denied because the county budget was focused on violent criminal cases. In his July 9th report to the sheriff, he wrote, "We are investigating a missing child case without an information support system, without a centralized vehicle database, and without a public alert mechanism. Current response speed is at least 72 hours below recommended standards." A subsequent independent review by the county office confirmed that many reports from other counties arrived at Yuma, an average of 2 days late, including 2 records possibly related to silver trucks sighted near the state border. By the time the information arrived, however, the patrol post was no longer staffed, and highway radar data had been overwritten. The evidence management system also had issues. Collected samples had to wait for processing at the Phoenix lab, averaging 2 weeks. Until results were available, tracing or DNA comparison was impossible. As a result, the case was stuck between jurisdictional levels, not enough evidence to escalate to kidnapping, yet impossible to close without locating the child. Local media began criticizing police delays, calling it the 48-hour silence. referring to the slow response period that effectively eliminated the chance of finding Benjamin. Even internally, many officers admitted that with an automatic alert system or linked license plate database, they could have tracked the truck's direction within the first 2 days. In 1984, however, the entire network relied solely on landlines, two-way radios, and paper files. The final inter-county coordination debrief closed with a brief conclusion recorded by Michael Keene in the minutes. Initial response delayed, inter-county communication insufficient, case remains local jurisdiction. The last line of the typed report was emphasized in bold, no federal criteria met, case retained under Yuma County authority. 2 weeks after the inter-county meeting ended without progress, the entire case fell into stagnation. New reports from patrol posts brought no additional data, and citizen tips were mostly duplicates or inaccurate. On July 16, Lieutenant Michael Keene submitted a summary. No new evidence, no vehicle confirmed, no subject cited. The official search force was stood down. The mobile command post set up at the Bryant home was dismantled, traffic cones and caution tape removed, and the neighborhood returned to normal. Volunteer rescue teams were disbanded, tracking dogs returned to Phoenix, and the file was temporarily shifted to periodic monitoring status. On the Yuma County Sheriff's Office bulletin board, the red active search operation notice was replaced with black lettering. Unsolved, monitoring stage. All collected evidence was sent to central storage pending Phoenix lab results, expected to take many weeks. The forensics unit reported that all existing samples were of unknown origin. Tire tracks and fabric fibers matched nothing in the state evidence database. Federal coordination remained at insufficient grounds, leaving the case entirely under county responsibility. Keene maintained a small 3-person investigative team to re-examine witness statements and timelines, but after dozens of hours of cross-checking, no inconsistencies produced a new lead. The house at 42 North 12th Street, once the center of the entire town's attention, fell silent again. Neighbors stopped gathering, the caution tape was gone, leaving only faint paint marks and stake holes in the grass. The Bryant family continued living in the same house, but no one came outside. Tom returned to work at the garage. Eileen took temporary leave from the grocery store and spent most of her time at home waiting for the phone to ring. Beth was sent to stay with an aunt in Gila Bend to escape the media and crowds. Every day Eileen called the sheriff's office for updates, her voice steady and dry, always receiving the same answer. Nothing new. Tom printed flyers himself and had friends post them along routes to the Welton and Parker deserts, and mailed them to rural stores. No one called back. On July 20th, Keene submitted the final summary of the initial phase. All field activities completed, subject not located. Recommended status unsolved. The sheriff's office approved changing the file status to unsolved case, missing juvenile. This meant direct search resources were cut, leaving only one officer to monitor citizen tips. Internally, the Bryant case was moved to the unsolved pile at the bottom of the board. Local newspapers stopped running updates, relegating it to a few lines in the weekend section. The disappearance of the 2-year-old boy that had shaken the Yuma community quickly faded into the background of other incidents. When the Phoenix Forensics Lab returned the evidence in early August, the report clearly stated no human DNA, no matching fingerprints, no biological material. The yellow fabric was identified as common mass-produced polyester used for clothing and curtains, untraceable. Tire tracks were consistent with dozens of truck models and held no identifying value. Keene read the report, folded it, and placed it in the nearly 2-inch thick file. He signed the bottom line. Investigation suspended pending new evidence. That phrase was familiar in hundreds of missing persons cases, but for him it was the saddest conclusion because every trace seemed to vanish in just 2 weeks. The Bryant family refused to accept that reality. Eileen applied for FBI assistance, but was denied for insufficient federal elements. Tom visited the sheriff's office to ask about hiring a private investigator, but was advised to wait. No one knew how long the wait would be. In the following afternoons, the house at number 42 remained closed, with only a weak yellow light glowing from the living room window. On the Yuma County Sheriff's Office electronic board, case file #840717 still appeared under active unresolved, but beside it was the cold status line. No progress reported. 2 weeks after Benjamin Bryant vanished, every witness, every piece of evidence, and every search effort had stopped at the same point. An empty space with no answers. After the search teams were disbanded, and the case file was reclassified as unsolved, the Bryant home gradually became a silent void in a neighborhood that had once been noisy with activity. 2 weeks turned into 3. Every morning Eileen still stepped onto the porch at dawn and stared at the wooden fence where Benjamin used to play in the sand. The front lawn had turned dry and yellow under the sun. The small red plastic toy remained untouched on the brick walkway. Tom tried to return to fixing cars at the old garage, but conversations with coworkers grew quiet. Everyone avoided mentioning the disappearance. The mounting pressure slowly drove the couple apart. Eileen spent all her time at home, clinging to a rigid schedule. 1 call to police each day, 1 letter to the local newspaper each week, 1 letter to the radio station each month, asking them to rebroadcast Benjamin's description. By the end of August, no agency responded. Tom began staying overnight at the garage, claiming it was for work, but really to escape the suffocating emptiness of the house. Their marriage, already worn down by months of waiting and silence, officially ended in the fall of 1984. Tom moved out and rented a room on the north side of town, taking only a few clothes and the wooden box containing Benjamin's pictures. Eileen did not see him off. She simply stood on the porch, watching his truck disappear around the corner. After that, they rarely saw each other again, except for a couple of meetings to sign separation papers. 8-year-old Beth returned from her aunt's after summer vacation and could not understand why everything had changed so fast. The little girl became much quieter and sometimes woke up screaming at night after dreaming that her brother was calling from the yard. The school suggested Eileen let Beth see a counselor, but she refused, believing her daughter just needed time. Every morning, Eileen forced Beth to eat breakfast and drove her to school, then returned home to sit for hours beside the telephone. For many months, she saved every news clipping, note, and fax from police, stacking them high on the dining table. The living room turned into a shrine of invisible evidence of obsession. Old flyers, enlarged photos, desert area maps. No new leads appeared, only time growing heavier. At Christmas, St. Mary's Church held a prayer service for missing persons. Eileen sat in the very back row, speaking to no one, clutching a photo of Benjamin in a green-striped shirt. When the priest read the names, someone touched her shoulder in comfort, but she only bowed her head. After the service, the local TV station aired a short segment interviewing victims' families. Eileen appeared for a few seconds saying, "I just want my son to be remembered." After that program, no media outlet returned. By early 1985, the Bryant case had virtually disappeared from the pages of the Yuma Sun. In police files, it still existed, but was marked "no further update." Many new officers who joined the department later never even heard of the case. The small Yuma community, accustomed to traffic accidents and petty theft, gradually treated it as a closed tragedy and stopped mentioning it. Neighbors who had once helped search now avoided the subject when they saw Eileen at the grocery store, offering only polite greetings before walking away. Tom occasionally called to check in, but the conversations were always short and awkward, mostly about Beth. He still carried guilt for not being in the yard when Benjamin vanished, while Eileen lived with the obsession that she had let her guard down for just a few minutes. They did not argue, but the distance between them became unbridgeable. Beth grew up in that silence, carrying vague memories of a blindingly sunny afternoon and her mother's panicked cries. Every year on June 17th, Eileen placed a small bouquet in front of the gate where Benjamin had stood and lit a candle. No one in the family still believed the child would return, yet she kept the old phone number and left his bedroom untouched. The green blanket remained neatly folded on the bed. Wooden toys on the shelf covered with a thin layer of dust. Police sometimes called to confirm an address or ask routine questions, and each time Eileen answered in exhaustive detail, as if the investigation were still active. She remembered every detail: what Benjamin wore that day, the truck's position, the wind direction, even the metallic sound of the neighbor's gate closing. Everything repeated in her mind, but led nowhere new. In the community, rumors began circulating. Some said the boy was abducted, others that he wandered into the desert. A few even whispered that the family was hiding something. Eileen heard it all but never responded. She simply lived in silence with the memories, in the house where time had stopped in the summer of 1984. By the late 1980s, Yuma entered a new phase of growth. New neighborhoods, stores and factories sprang up. The Benjamin Bryant case was pushed out of collective memory, surviving only in a few old files in the sheriff's storage room. Tom moved to another state, Eileen stayed, and Beth grew up in the shadow of an unresolved past. While most residents forgot, one mother kept her old habit. Every morning she opened the door, looked at the empty yard, and told herself, "He's still out there somewhere." The case, along with the fractures in the Bryant family, sank into Yuma's past, closing the first chapter of a story whose length no one could predict. In 1990, 6 years after the disappearance, the Bryant file was officially transferred to the Yuma County Sheriff's Office, cold case category, by administrative order of Sheriff Jack Rourke. The reason recorded in the minutes was, no new evidence, no identified suspect or victim location. That April, the statewide record storage system was reorganized, and all missing persons cases over 5 years old, with no developments, were recategorized by region and year. File hash 840717 retained its number, but was moved to an iron shelf in the basement of the Central Arizona State Evidence Warehouse in Phoenix. In internal documents, the Bryant case was marked as one of 142 unsolved juvenile cases. The procedure meant the case would no longer be actively investigated. Any request to reopen required legal grounds or newly verified evidence. Before leaving office, Sheriff Rourke, who had directed the first days of the disappearance, personally reviewed the file one last time. He spent nearly 2 days in his office rereading every report, from the scene log and Harold Kane's witness statement to the recording of Eileen Bryant's initial 911 call. In his personal notebook, he wrote briefly, "Nothing wrong with procedure, just everything arrived too late." He ordered the archives department to make a complete official copy and kept one in his private files, a habit he followed for certain unsolved cases he believed were not truly closed. That same year, he retired after 32 years of service and moved to Prescott with his wife. The duplicate Bryant file was stored in a small wooden cabinet in his basement, alongside other cases he had investigated. In Yuma, the sheriff position passed to Frank Delaney, a member of the new generation of officers focused on drug crimes and border activity. Under Delaney, nearly all old missing persons files remained untouched and were not re-examined. The Bryant physical evidence, yellow fabric sample, tire track photos and scene reports, was sealed in metal box E4784. Under new state regulations, all indefinite retention evidence was transferred to the Arizona State Evidence Warehouse in Phoenix for long-term storage. Box E4784 was transported with 63 other crates in a specialized truck on September 12, 1990. At the central facility, technicians noted the condition: seal intact, good preservation, no damage. The entry was stamped and logged under subcode AZ1984YU047. In the years that followed, no retrieval request was ever made for that box. In Yuma, the paper file remained with hundreds of others in a metal cabinet in the records room on the ground floor of the old headquarters on Madison Avenue. When computers were introduced in the early 1990s, Bryant data was entered in basic form: name, date of birth, disappearance date, and file number only, no images. In the digital database, the only note displayed was status cold, last update 1985. In 1991, the records room established a policy of reviewing cold cases every 3 years, However, Bryant was never selected due to low reopening potential. The sole remaining missing person poster stayed on the internal bulletin board until the building was renovated in 1993, then was removed and never kept. On the other side of the story, Eileen Bryant continued living in the same house on North 12th Street, mailing a letter to police every year on the anniversary of her son's disappearance. The letters were logged in the citizen correspondence file but never received specific replies. Occasionally, a young officer would read the file and ask a supervisor, "Was the Bryant boy case ever reopened?" The answer was always the same: there's nothing to reopen. The only additional entry in the file was a change in parental status. Tom Bryant relocated, out of state, added in 1992. After that, case hash 840717 was never mentioned again in meetings or periodic reports. In Phoenix, inside the climate-controlled 61-degree evidence warehouse, metal box E4784 sat motionless on its shelf, its label fading with time. Rotating staff over the years saw it only as another anonymous storage code among thousands of Arizona missing persons cases. No one imagined that 3 decades later, that very evidence would become the key to reopening a case long thought asleep. In 1995, more than 10 years after the Benjamin Bryant case was officially classified as a cold case, an unexpected report was sent to the Yuma County Sheriff's Office from the state of Utah. The tip came from Margaret Hensley, 61, a resident of St. George, nearly 400 miles north of Yuma. In a 2-page typed statement, she recounted that around July 1985, while working part-time at a highway rest stop on Interstate 15, she saw a blonde woman driving a silver pickup truck pull in for gas and drinks. The woman seemed in a hurry and was accompanied by a child about 2 years old, with light brown hair and fair skin, clutching an old teddy bear. According to Hensley, what stuck with her was the child's eyes were so sad, like he was about to cry but didn't dare. She said that when she saw a TV program about missing persons in early 1995, the illustration of the Bryant case felt instantly familiar, prompting her to search her memory. She was not certain of the exact date, only estimating midsummer because it was very hot, and there were many tourists passing through. The report was submitted through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children hotline and then forwarded to Yuma for verification. When the file reached Sheriff Frank Delaney's office, it was handled by Sergeant Kevin Morley, a young officer who had never worked the initial phase of the case. Morley pulled file hash 840717 from archives, reviewed everything, but found no color photograph of the blonde woman described by witness Harold Kane in 1984, only a crude black and white composite sketch. He contacted Hensley again to attempt photo confirmation, but with no original photos available for comparison, the exchange ended at unable to verify. The records department also no longer had the original missing person photo of Benjamin, only blurry photocopies from flyers, making any comparison with the witness description meaningless. The internal report noted, "Witness credible but unverifiable, insufficient to reopen case." Morley nonetheless chose to retain the statement as supplemental information, assigning it subfile hash 840717W95/UT with the brief description, "Adult female, blonde, seen with minor matching general description, location I-15 Utah, date July 1985. The data was entered into the department's new electronic system, but was not flagged for reinvestigation. At the time, Yuma County's budget for cold cases was extremely limited, prioritizing only cases with clear physical evidence or DNA. When Morley presented the report to his superior, Sheriff Delaney checked the record-only box, meaning it would be noted, but no action taken. He believed the 1-year gap between the disappearance and the sighting greatly reduced its evidentiary value, and that in summertime St. George, hundreds of traveling families passed through, making generic child descriptions easy to match by coincidence. The final report was completed on April 17, 1995, signed by both men. The last line of the memo read, "No corroborating evidence, filed under supplemental note. The matter was not publicized. Only one copy was sent to the Arizona State Database to be kept with the original file. For her part, Margaret Hensley believed she had seen something important, and a few months later sent a handwritten follow-up letter to the Yuma County Sheriff's Office with more detail about the woman. About 5'5", lightly curly hair, wearing a faded denim jacket, speaking with a Western accent. In the letter she also mentioned the child was riding in the front seat, without a seatbelt, something that had struck her at the time. The letter was forwarded to records, attached to the original report, but received no response. Inside the department, the Bryant case remained dormant, with no further activity. 11 years after the disappearance, the file had gained only a few additional pages of description that virtually no one knew existed from a new witness in Utah. When the Arizona State Evidence Vault conducted its routine year-end inventory, they found Box E4784 still sealed and untouched, with no retrieval requests. The inventory log clearly stated, "Case remains inactive, last supplement April 1995. To the Yuma Sheriff's Office, it was just a minor note among thousands of old files. But to a mother still living in the small house on North 12th Street, it was the first time in many years that Benjamin's name had appeared in an official report, even if only as a quiet footnote at the bottom of a page. In early 2001, when the FBI announced the completion of the National DNA Index System, NDIS, police departments across the country began reviewing unsolved missing persons cases to prepare evidence for transfer. Though small, Yuma County was required to submit a list of unresolved disappearances potentially identifiable through DNA. On the list sent February 12, file hash 840717, Bryant, Benjamin, missing juvenile June 1984, appeared as item 47. Evidence box E4784 was still stored intact at the Arizona State Vault, sealed since 1990. Upon request, the State Crime Lab opened the box and confirmed it contained polyester fabric, tire track photos, 2 small sealed bags with metal paint chips, and soil from the scene. None contained human biological material, but the file noted DNA reference from maternal line pending. This was an old recommendation from Lieutenant Michael Keene in 1986. To collect family DNA if technology later allowed comparison. Now it was possible. In late March 2001, the FBI notified agencies with unsolved cases lacking biological samples to obtain reference samples from direct relatives. The Yuma County Sheriff's Office recontacted Eileen Bryant, then 53, still living in the same house on North 12th Street, and her daughter Beth, now 25. Both agreed to participate. On April 2, an Arizona state forensic technician collected buccal swabs and created federally standardized identification profiles. The report read, sample source, maternal and sibling. Purpose, NDIS reference profile entry. After signing, Eileen asked the technician the question she had carried for 17 years, does this mean they'll find him? The technician only replied that NDIS enables automatic nationwide comparison with any unidentified DNA profile. The moment a match occurs, an alert is sent instantly. The mother and daughter's samples were sealed in specialized tubes, transported to the Phoenix lab, and entered into NDIS by late April 2001 under National Identifier US Miss AZ8 40717. From that point, the Benjamin Bryant case officially became one of Arizona's first to be digitized and stored under the National DNA Protocol. Electronic copies of the file with genetic data were sent to the FBI's Tucson field office and linked to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System when it began its pilot phase that same year. In Yuma, the paper file was closed and marked DNA submitted, pending match. Sergeant Kevin Morley, who had handled the 1995 Utah witness tip, was assigned to monitor results periodically. He entered the data into the new case management software with the note, awaiting automatic notification, no manual recheck required. At that time, NDIS was still very new. Data entry from states was slow and mostly served criminal rather than missing persons comparisons. For the first 2 years, no results appeared for the Bryant profile. Periodic FBI reports simply stated, no matching profile found in national database. Nevertheless, Eileen and Beth received annual status updates, and for the first time in nearly 2 decades, they felt their case was still being seen. An internal Yuma County Sheriff's Office bulletin in 2002 recorded a small detail during the year's first meeting. The state forensic chief cited the Bryant case as an example of proper evidence preservation under the new DNA standards. An old case but preserved correctly, ready for reanalysis at any time. As a result, Benjamin Bryant's name appeared once more in training materials for young officers, no longer classified as permanently missing, but placed in the category cases with potential DNA resolution. However, when NDIS expanded in 2003 and thousands of new profiles were added, the Bryant case sank again into the massive data pool. No alerts, no matches, just dry periodic updates. No match generated this cycle. The Phoenix lab confirmed the original evidence, E47. 84 remained in stable condition at 16 degrees Celsius and 30% humidity with no degradation. The final 2004 inventory report noted, physical evidence retained, DNA profile active, awaiting match. Those simple words were the entire reality of the case at that point. An old file, 2 DNA profiles, quietly sitting in the federal system, waiting for a match that had never come. For Eileen, it was the last sliver of hope. For the investigative system, just one more unresolved missing person case among tens of thousands in America. In early 2019, nearly 2 decades after Eileen and Beth Bryant's DNA was stored in NDIS, an unexpected hit appeared at GeneLink, a private lab in Denver partnering with federal agencies on the newly expanded genetic genealogy program. On March 14, 2019, analyst Sarah Connell discovered a consumer DNA sample in the MyHeritage DNA database with a 99.97% match to the NDIS reference profile. U.S. Miss A 840717 compared to Beth Bryant's sample, indicating a first-degree biological relationship, parent, child, or full sibling. The matching sample belonged to David Myers, residing in Helena, Montana, born 1982. The system automatically flagged it as potential direct biological sibling and routed it to the identification team. When Connell reviewed the original case, she realized the Bryant disappearance was one of Arizona's longest-running active DNA missing child cases. An urgent report was sent to the federal CODIS GeneLink coordinator with the note, "Possible match via consumer genealogy database, requires law enforcement validation." Per protocol, all such hits must be verified through the original case's managing agency. On March 20th, formal notification was sent to the Arizona Department of Public Safety, which oversees the state's cold case unit. GeneLink's letter stated clearly, reference sample from Beth Bryant shows 99.97% DNA match with individual David Myers, Helena, Montana. ADPS immediately forwarded the information to the cold case unit in Phoenix to begin verification. The Bryant file, dormant for nearly 35 years, was reactivated in the electronic system for the first time. A 3-person team, lead investigator Megan Crowell, forensic specialist Elliot Ramos, and data analyst Rachel Moore, was assigned to review all archived materials. They pulled file hash 840717 from central storage and requested the evidence box E4784 be unsealed to confirm the original DNA identifiers remained intact. The unsealing report dated March 27, 2019, confirmed the evidence was undamaged and the stored DNA codes matched perfectly. A same-day report to the FBI Tucson field office requested full sequence comparison assistance. Meanwhile, the cold case unit researched the matching individual, David Myers, 37, born in Helena, Montana, employed by a local power company, clean record, no criminal history. According to GeneLink, Myers had voluntarily submitted his DNA in 2017 for personal genealogy research. His profile was in the public MyHeritage DNA database and had been incorporated into GeneLink's law enforcement matching system through a public-private partnership. When initially contacted by email, Myers stated he had no idea his DNA could be linked to a missing person case. He explained he was adopted in 1985 by William and Carol Myers in Helena through a private agency based in Reno, Nevada. The adoption file did not list biological parents, only the note "abandoned infant, approximately 2 years old, recovered in rural Nevada, June 1985. When this information reached the Arizona Cold Case Unit, the team fell almost silent. The timeline, June 1985, matched almost perfectly with the period witness Margaret Hensley in Utah reported seeing a blonde woman with a 2-year-old child on I-15. Crowell ordered the data team to re-examine all old statements and create a timeline and location chart. Within 24 hours, they confirmed a route from Yuma to St. George to Reno via Highway 95, and I-15 was entirely feasible in a few days. On April 1, 2019, an official report was sent to the FBI and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. High probability match found via genealogy analysis, case reactivation requested. The Arizona State Command signed the order to reopen the Bryant investigation, assigning the Cold Case Unit to coordinate with Montana and Nevada authorities to verify David Myers' true identity. The internal bulletin recorded the event in a single line: Bryant case reopened after 35 years, genetic link identified. After more than 3 decades, the name Benjamin Bryant, the 2-year-old boy who vanished from his Yuma front yard in 1984, reappeared in the criminal justice system, no longer as an old case number, but as a living person with a different name, peacefully residing nearly 1,200 miles from where he disappeared. On April 4, 2019, after the Arizona Cold Case Unit officially reactivated the Bryant investigation, the file was transferred to Special Investigations Detective Laura Hendricks, a 42-year-old investigator with over 15 years of experience in cold cases involving identity issues. Hendricks had worked several DNA identification cases, including the 2016 Mesa Jane Doe, so she was chosen to handle #8400717 directly. Immediately upon assignment, she requested complete copies of the original file, including scene reports, witness statements, photographs, and especially evidence box E4784, stored in Phoenix. On April 8, Hendricks and forensic specialist Elliot Ramos went to the state vault and conducted the second unsealing of the box in nearly 30 years. Inside the metal container, besides the previously cataloged items, they discovered a small sealed evidence bag, never analyzed with DNA technology, containing a piece of yellow fabric with a faint brownish stain, labeled in old ink. Recovered near gate, north perimeter. In 1984, the technology did not exist to extract DNA from such a tiny biological trace, but modern full gene sequencing could now isolate DNA from mere skin cells. Hendricks immediately ordered the sample sent to the FBI laboratory at Quantico for testing. Results returned April 22. Partial DNA profile recovered, female origin. The profile belonged to an adult woman, not matching any criminal database entries, but when entered into the expanded genealogical database, it produced a striking result: high similarity to David Myers, the individual already confirmed as biologically related to the Bryant family. GeneLink specialists traced backward through the family tree and determined the seen DNA had a 50% probability of belonging to a woman named Alice Myers, born 1945 in Bakersfield, California, died 1997 in Reno, Nevada. GeneLink's final report concluded, maternal DNA match confirmed, probability of maternity 99.82%. Reading that line, Hendricks understood the yellow fabric scrap with human cells found on the Bryant fence in 1984 belonged to the same bloodline as the woman who raised the abducted child. Alice Myers, who had lived with her husband William Myers in Helena, Montana. That result opened an entirely new investigative direction. That same day, Hendricks convened a meeting at the Cold Case Unit and presented a timeline linking 1984, disappearance in Yuma, 1985, child recorded as abandoned infant in Nevada, 1997. Alice Myers dies in Reno. The timeline aligned precisely with Margaret Hensley's sighting of the blonde woman and the Nevada adoption. Hendricks directed analyst Rachel Moore to obtain David Myers' full adoption file through the Reno Family Court. After 1 week of searches, Moore confirmed adoption papers were filed July 10, 1985, listing Alice and William Myers, Helena, Montana, as legal adoptive parents, facilitated by the now-defunct private agency Westline Adoption Services. No biological parent information existed, only a vague handwritten note infant located roadside Washoe County. Hendricks noted red flags that agency had been investigated in the late 1980s for suspected falsification of abandoned baby paperwork. She requested all remaining Westline records from Nevada archives and contacted Reno police for Alice Myers' death certificate and funeral home files. Confirmation came that Alice died of heart disease in September 1997 and was buried at Mountain View Cemetery with no criminal investigation ever opened. However, when Hendricks pulled personal records, she discovered Alice had lived in Reno during the exact period of the abandoned infant report and owned a 1978 silver Ford F-150. The exact make and color described in the Bryant file. The DNA and documentary evidence were now fitting together like the final pieces of a long-torn picture. Hendricks wrote in her investigative notebook, "Connection between suspect vehicle and maternal DNA confirmed. Probability, abducted child raised as adoptive." She asked the FBI Tucson field office to assist in reconstructing Alice Myers' full 1980s activity, travel records, driver's license history, and medical declarations. Data showed she had been treated at a private clinic in Kingman, Arizona, in July 1984, just 3 weeks after Benjamin's disappearance. That information solidified the theory that Alice Myers was the blonde woman seen near the Bryant residence. Hendricks's report to the State Investigative Bureau on May 3, 2019 concluded, new forensic link established maternal DNA from evidence E4784, matches deceased female, Alice Myers. Recommended classification probable abduction and illegal adoption case. Investigation to expand to Nevada jurisdiction. The Bryant file was flagged Priority Level 1 in Arizona's cold case catalog and moved into the phase of tracing the origins of the child, now known as David Myers, who, according to all scientific evidence, was almost certainly Benjamin Bryant, the 2-year-old taken from his Yuma home 35 years earlier. During the expansion of the investigation in a new direction, Detective Laura Hendricks requested the Federal Data Division to retrieve all personal background information on Alice Myers prior to her settlement in Montana. Cross-referencing from civil and medical records revealed that Alice had lived in Fresno, California from 1980 to 1983. A copy of the Fresno General Hospital records was sent to the Cold Case Unit on May 12, 2019, stating clearly, patient, Alice Louise Myers, DOB 1945, admitted March 12, 1983. Diagnosis complications of miscarriage, major depressive episode. Following the miscarriage, she was transferred to St. Anne's Clinic, a psychiatric treatment center in Tucson, Arizona, where she was treated for 4 months with a diagnosis of affective disorder following perinatal loss. This was the first detail revealing a potential psychological motive for the abduction. Hendricks noted in her report, subject experienced perinatal loss 1 year before Bryant abduction, emotional instability documented. Analysis of her movement history showed that Alice and her husband William Myers worked freelance jobs and frequently relocated between southwestern states. Collected bills and rental records confirmed the couple had lived in multiple locations, Bakersfield in 1983 and Kingman in the summer of 1984. Exactly when Benjamin Bryant disappeared. In the Arizona driver's license record issued in May 1984, Alice's address was listed on Silver Creek Road, Kingman, only about 160 miles from Yuma. Hendricks assessed this as a feasible southern route that aligned with the area where Benjamin vanished. Witnesses in the Bryant neighborhood had previously described a blonde woman, approximately 35–40 years old, driving a silver pickup truck, seen several days before the disappearance, and Alice Myers was 39 at the time and owned a 1978 silver Ford F-150, registered in Arizona in February 1984. Tax records showed the vehicle was later sold to a dealership in Reno in 1985, coinciding with the time she and her husband registered an adopted child. All the data points were gradually forming a coherent chain. Hendricks continued requesting Alice's psychiatric treatment records from Tucson, and in the treating physician's handwritten notes from 1983, she discovered a striking entry. Patient expresses fixation on motherhood. Believes her child will return or be replaced. 1 month before discharge, Alice wrote in a self-statement, "If I could start over, I would bring home a child to love." In the context of a woman who had lost a pregnancy, this language reflected obsession and denial of reality. Hendricks regarded this as indirect psychological evidence, supporting the possibility of substitution kidnapping, abduction to replace a lost child. She wrote in the case file, "Emotional motivation consistent with grief-induced abduction pattern." The California Department of Justice confirmed Alice had no prior criminal record or arrests. Her husband, William Myers, also had no criminal history, though he had been questioned by Fresno police in 1982 regarding a financial dispute with an obstetrics clinic. No charges were filed, but it indicated the couple had experienced financial difficulties before the miscarriage. When Hendricks traced residency data in Fresno, she discovered Alice had previously worked as a nursing assistant at a private pediatric clinic, a position that gave her access to information about families with young children. The working hypothesis emerged. After losing her pregnancy and suffering a psychological breakdown, Alice left Fresno, received treatment in Tucson, then drifted through southern Arizona, searching for a child her subconscious viewed as compensation for her loss. Hendricks compiled all the evidence and presented it in a report submitted to the Arizona Department of Public Safety. Subject profile: female, 39, history of miscarriage, depressive episode, documented maternal fixation. Residence pattern places her within 150 miles of abduction site during June 1984. At the same time, forensic specialist Elliot Ramos compared Alice Myers' DNA with genetic material from evidence item E4784 and a sample from David Myers, concluding an absolute maternal match, confirming she was the woman present at the scene and the legal adoptive mother of the child, later found in Nevada. Hendricks requested expanded verification with hospitals along the I-8 and I-10 corridors for any medical or administrative trace of Alice during the summer of 1984. Records from Yuma Regional Medical Center archives documented an unidentified woman who sought treatment on June 18, 1984. Just 1 day after Benjamin disappeared, for minor scratches on her hand. The visit was paid in cash. The name given was A. Myers, and the address listed vaguely as Kingman, Arizona. No ID was presented. Hendricks viewed this as corroborating evidence that Alice was in Yuma at the exact time of the crime. In the June 2019 supplemental case summary, Hendricks wrote, "All evidence points to premeditated child abduction motivated by grief and substitution after miscarriage." Finally, she listed the key facts: 1. Alice's DNA at the scene, matching evidence E4784. 2. Travel pattern aligning with the Kingman, Yuma, Reno, Helena route. 3. Medical records confirming pregnancy loss and psychiatric disorder. 4. Clear substitution abduction motive. With that conclusion, the Cold Case Unit officially established the primary investigative direction: Alice Myers, suspect in a grief-driven substitution, kidnapping with psychological rather than financial motive. For the first time in 35 years, the Benjamin Bryant case had a clearly identified suspect on file, even though that person had been dead for over 2 decades. As the investigation shifted focus to the legalization of the abducted child's identity, Detective Laura Hendricks requested that Nevada state administrative authorities provide the original birth certificate for the individual named David Myers, born 1982, registered by Alice and William Myers in 1985. The copy was delivered to the cold case unit on July 2, 2019, a pale blue certificate with faded printing and an embossed State Health Department seal. Immediately upon receipt, Hendricks spotted irregularities. The place of birth was listed as Washoe County Hospital, which had not existed under that name in 1982, because it had merged into Reno Regional Medical Center in 1980. In the attending physician field, the signature read Dr. Henry Lowell, a person never licensed to practice in Nevada. The signature on the copy was identical in pen stroke to that of the declarant, Alice Myers. Document examiner Rachel Moore enlarged the signatures using forensic handwriting software and determined an 87% probability they were written by the same person. The mother field listed Alice Louise Myers, age 39. The father field listed William Dean Myers, age 41. The child's date of birth was recorded as June 12, 1982, 2 full years earlier than Benjamin Bryant's actual 1980 birth year. Yet according to the 1985 adoption paperwork filed with the Reno Family Court, the Myers claimed they adopted an abandoned boy with no documentation, approximately 2 years old. The existence of a legitimate-looking birth certificate with a specific date and place of birth proved they had deliberately created false administrative records to establish a new identity. Hendricks contacted the Nevada Vital Records Office for issuance verification and was informed that certificate number W1985-4421 did not fall within the official sequential range issued in 1985. Archives contained only a single copy with no original record. An internal health department note stated, "Document not originated from state database, likely counterfeit submission accepted through manual clerical entry." In other words, the David Myers birth certificate had been manually inserted into the paper-based system before the state transitioned to digital storage, and due to the lack of automated verification at the time, the forgery remained legally valid for over 3 decades. Tracing who might have facilitated this, Hendricks discovered Alice had worked in the Fresno County Health Department office in the 1970s and knew a former clerical employee named Carol Kemp, who later transferred to the Nevada Department of Health in Reno in the early 1980s. Kemp died in 2001, but old employment records confirmed she had access to the manual birth registration system during that period. From this, Hendricks formed the hypothesis that Alice enlisted an inside contact to create a fraudulent birth record for David Myers, using the name of a defunct hospital, a fictitious doctor, and forging all signatures, the goal being that when the adoption paperwork was filed, the fake birth certificate would serve as proof of legitimate origin, making the abducted child appear fully documented. This explained why the Westline Adoption Services file contained no accompanying medical records. The Myers simply presented the pre-existing certificate. Hendricks forwarded the report to the Nevada Attorney General's office, requesting formal legal examination. The forensic report, dated July 19, 2019, concluded, "Document exhibits mechanical signature duplication. Ink composition dated post-1984. Not produced by official state print batch." Conclusion, the birth certificate was counterfeit, created after Benjamin Bryant's disappearance. This was direct evidence that Alice Myers actively fabricated a new identity for the boy, transforming Benjamin into David Myers. Hendricks continued searching related documents and located the Myers 1986 federal tax return, claiming dependent son David M., born 1982, residing Helena, Montana. That entry proved the forged certificate had been accepted into the federal administrative system, completing the legalization process. When all facts were aligned, Hendricks saw the chain of events unfold with near-perfect precision. Alice lost her pregnancy in 1983, suffered a psychiatric crisis, left Tucson in early 1984, appeared in Kingman, abducted Benjamin and Yuma in June, returned to Reno, created false paperwork, and with her husband completed legal adoption proceedings in 1985. All made possible by one non-existent certificate of live birth. The Cold Case Unit's consolidated report dated July 22, 2019, stated clearly, Forged birth certificate W1985, 4421, constitutes direct evidence of identity alteration. Subject: Alice Myers fabricated document to legalize abducted child under false identity. Connection to Bryant case, definitive. After 35 years, a case long buried under dust now had its first piece of authenticated legal evidence, no longer hypothesis, but prosecutable proof against a woman long dead, who once carried a child out of the Arizona desert and silently shattered an entire family. With the forged birth certificate evidence secured, Detective Laura Hendricks focused on reconstructing Alice Myers' complete travel itinerary in the days immediately following the abduction to establish the route and timeline by which she left Arizona with Benjamin. Using bank records, fuel receipts, and old tax file invoices, the team built a detailed map of the probable journey. Financial forensics specialist Elliot Ramos of the Cold Case Unit was tasked with reviewing bank transaction copies provided by Wells Fargo, where William Myers held a joint account. The record showed that on June 17, 1984, the same day Benjamin vanished, a $200 cash withdrawal was made at the Wells Fargo branch in Kingman, Arizona. 2 days later, on June 19, the same account's credit card was used at a Texaco station in Blythe, California, only about 90 miles west of Yuma. The reprinted fuel receipt confirmed purchase of 15 gallons of gasoline and a bottled soft drink, signed A. Myers. This was the first physical proof that Alice left Arizona almost immediately after the abduction. Hendricks marked the location as Stop 1 on the travel diagram. From Blythe, the next segment was traced using lodging receipts retrieved by the Utah Tourism Office from microfilm registry records. On June 21, a woman named Alice M. rented a room at the Desert View Motel in St. George, Utah, with a 2-year-old son, according to the description provided at the time by the then-manager Ralph Connors, now in his 80s. In a new statement recorded in August 2019, Connors recalled, "I remember it clearly because the little boy was very quiet, brown hair, and had a strange stare, didn't say anything." The handwritten receipt matched the slant of Alice Myers' known forgery signature, with a note at the bottom, "Paid cash. No ID required." From St. George, the team followed smaller leads: a repair invoice from a Cedar City, Utah, garage dated June 23 for front tire replacement on a silver Ford F-150 bearing Arizona plate AZ94 B237, the exact plate registered to the Myers. After leaving Utah, the route continued north. The next piece of evidence was a pediatric clinic record in Pocatello, Idaho, dated June 27, 1984, listing David Myers, 2 years old, treated for a mild cough. Physician note, accompanied by mother, blonde, mid-30s, anxious but polite. No permanent address, only the notation traveling through to Montana. Hendricks regarded this as critical proof that Alice began using the false name David Myers for the child just 10 days after the abduction. Thus, the journey from Yuma to Idaho took place over approximately 10 days, covering more than 900 highway miles, indicating continuous travel in her own truck. By aggregating timestamps from receipts, Hendricks calculated that Benjamin was removed from Arizona less than 48 hours after disappearing, before police could establish inter-county checkpoints. Additional bank archive data confirmed another cash withdrawal of $120 at First Bank of Utah in Salt Lake City on June 24, bearing the same signature pattern. This showed the Myers had planned the finances in advance, not acted impulsively. Hendricks and Ramos built a digital map with 7 confirmed stops: Yuma, Kingman, Blythe, St. George, Cedar City, Pocatello, Helena. The full route spanned over 1,200 miles across 4 states in roughly 11 days. When cross-referenced with the old statement of witness Margaret Hensley in Utah, the timing of Alice's stop in St. George perfectly matched the moment Hensley saw a blonde woman holding a child at a gas station. Hendricks noted, witness statement corroborated by financial and logistical evidence travel consistent with post-abduction relocation. In Helena, civil records showed William and Alice Myers rented a small house on Garfield Avenue in early July 1984, with the lease listing 2 adults and 1 small child. The landlord, re-interviewed in 2019, confirmed the blonde woman always kept her distance and never let neighbors hold the child. All evidence indicated that after leaving Arizona, Alice moved quickly, kept to herself, and avoided local authorities. Hendricks also reviewed tax data and discovered that in the 1985 return, William Myers claimed medical expenses for dependent child, supported by a Helena Hospital invoice dated August 2, 1984, for patient David M. age, listed as 2. The cold case unit's final report dated September 5, 2019, concluded, all confirmed evidence establishes subject's route from Arizona to Montana within 11 days of abduction. Victim removed from state jurisdiction within 48 hours, making recovery impossible under 1984 inter-county coordination. After 35 years, thanks to modern financial data technology and administrative tracing, the case could now precisely map the child's journey from a Yuma backyard through southwestern gas stations and motels to the mountains of Helena, where he lived his entire life, under a different name. While his original file in Arizona remained locked in a cabinet marked missing, unresolved. On September 10, 2019, after completing the reconstruction of Alice Myers' post-abduction travel, Detective Laura Hendricks was authorized to travel directly to Helena, Montana, to verify the identity of the man named David Myers, the individual whose genealogical DNA results showed direct biological relation to the Bryant family. The trip was kept strictly confidential, with only the Lewis and Clark County Sheriff's Office notified for administrative support. That morning, Hendricks landed at Helena's small airport carrying a nearly 2-inch thick case file containing copies of the forged birth certificate, the 2019 DNA analysis, and photographs of 2-year-old Benjamin Bryant. David Myers' current address was confirmed through civil databases, 411 Beatty Street, North Hills suburb. He was 37, worked as an electrical repair technician for the local utility Helena Electric Cooperative, was married, and had a 5-year-old daughter. Background checks showed no criminal record, no debt, a stable life, and co-workers described him as calm, considerate, but always somewhat distant. Hendricks, accompanied by Montana Detective Mark Healy, met him that afternoon. They arrived as David returned from work, his blue Dodge Ram pickup pulled into the driveway. Upon introduction, Hendricks showed her badge and explained it was a meeting regarding verification of identity in an old case. David remained calm and invited them inside. The small house was tidy, walls decorated with mountain landscape photos, but no old family pictures. In the initial conversation, Hendricks asked basic questions: date of birth, place of birth, parents, length of residence in Helena. He answered clearly, stating he had been adopted as a baby, knew only his adoptive parents William and Alice Myers, and had never been told about his origins. When asked if he had ever doubted his paperwork, David replied, "I always thought it was odd because there are no photos of me before age 2, and my mother avoided talking about the past." Hendricks observed his expression and noted neutral reactions, no defensiveness or panic. After briefly explaining the National DNA Identification Program and informing him that a genetic match required verification, she requested permission to collect a DNA sample to complete the identity confirmation process. David agreed immediately, saying that if it helped clarify my own origins, he was willing to cooperate. The sample was taken via standard forensic oral swab, with an on-site signed receipt. Hendricks sent it the same day to the FBI lab at Quantico via priority courier. After the sample collection, she continued asking about his childhood. He said he was brought to Montana by his adoptive parents when he was very small, not yet talking, grew up in the small town, attended Capitol High School, and had never left Helena for long. He described his adoptive mother as gentle but suffered from insomnia and was afraid of truck noises, a detail that caught Hendricks' attention given the Yuma abduction context. When asked if he had ever seen adoption papers or medical records, David said he only had an old birth certificate listing birth at Washoe County Hospital. The document Hendricks knew was fake. He added, "I once used that paper to get a passport. The clerk said it looked strange, but it was accepted because it had the raised seal." The conversation lasted over 2 hours. Throughout, David remained cooperative and unguarded, only slightly confused when asked about his earliest memory. He vaguely recalled a house with a white fence and a red plastic swing. Upon hearing that, Hendricks was almost certain it was a subconscious memory of the Bryant family's backyard in Yuma in 1984. A detail only the toddler Benjamin could retain. After the interview, Hendricks left, sat in her car for a few minutes, and wrote, "Subject displays consistent timeline, emotional neutrality, early childhood recollection matches Yuma property layout." The next day she met David again at the local sheriff's office to complete the federal identity verification consent form. He signed without hesitation. Meanwhile, the Quantico lab had received the sample and begun comparison against the reference profiles of Eileen and Beth Bryant. When Hendricks returned to Phoenix 3 days later, she was told results would be ready within 7 business days. In her report to the Arizona Department of Public Safety, she summarized, subject David Myers, 37, male, residing Helena, Montana. No criminal background. Cooperative during interview. DNA sample obtained for verification. Preliminary observation consistent with identity hypothesis. Back at the cold case unit office, she placed the file on her desk and added a small note on the red cover, awaiting confirmation. After 35 years, the efforts of dozens of people, from the first witnesses in Yuma to modern forensic specialists, had converged on a single point. An ordinary man in Montana, who had no idea his entire life was simply the continuation of a disappearance forgotten since 1984. On September 23, 2019, exactly 9 days after Detective Laura Hendricks collected a DNA sample in Helena, the Federal Forensic Laboratory at Quantico sent a sealed envelope marked confidential genetic confirmation report to the Arizona Cold Case Unit. Inside was a 7-page report signed by Dr. Raymond Cho, head of biological analysis. The final conclusion was printed in bold: DNA comparison between subject David Myers and reference profiles Eileen Bryant. Beth Bryant demonstrates a probability of maternity 99.9998% and sibling relationship 99.996%. Conclusion: David Myers is genetically identical to missing child Benjamin Bryant. Hendricks read it 3 times, then sat in silence for several minutes before signing the acknowledgement of receipt. After 35 years, what dozens of investigators, technicians, and the Bryant family had tried to prove through faith and memory was finally validated by absolute scientific data. The report was immediately forwarded to the FBI's Tucson field office for mandatory federal cross-verification. Within 2 days, the FBI's independent laboratory completed the comparison and confirmed that Quantico's results matched perfectly, with no discrepancies in genetic markers or sample identifiers. On September 25, the FBI issued an official notification to the Arizona Department of Public Safety: verification complete. Subject David Myers conclusively identified as missing person Benjamin Bryant, reported Yuma County, June 1984. The same day, an internal notice was sent to the Yuma Police Department and the county sheriff's office, changing case hash 840717 from unsolved missing juvenile to located verified. The entire file was temporarily placed in the pending legal closure category to prepare for formal legal closure procedures. Hendricks held a closed-door meeting at the cold case unit, attended by FBI representatives, the Arizona State Prosecutor's Office, and relevant forensic specialists. On the table, she presented a summary of the results along with supporting evidence, genetic links, Alice Myers' travel timeline, the forged birth certificate, and Benjamin David's current identity. The task force's final conclusion was recorded in the minutes of September 26, All forensic and genealogical evidence supports identification. Case eligible for official closure upon legal verification of identity change. The Arizona State Prosecutor's Office agreed to initiate a posthumous prosecution process, a symbolic prosecution against a deceased person, to formalize recognition of the victim and establish criminal responsibility for Alice Myers in the 1984 kidnapping. This was not intended for actual criminal prosecution, but to create a legal basis for closing the file and recognizing the victim's original identity. On September 30th, the FBI issued a memorandum to the Mountain West Regional Division stating Benjamin Bryant located alive under adoptive identity. It was one of only 6 missing person cases older than 30 years resolved using genetic genealogy technology in 2019. Internally, the case was classified as a textbook example of hybrid identification, forensic plus genealogical plus document reconstruction. In Yuma, when the news reached the sheriff's office, veterans from the 1980s could not hide their emotion. Retired Lieutenant Michael Keene, who had led the original investigation, was contacted to verify file details. He said over the phone, "We always believed the boy was still out there somewhere. We just didn't have the tools to find him." The official Arizona DPS report, dated October 2, 2019, stated clearly, Case hash 840717, DNA identification confirmed through FBI and GeneLink cooperation. Subject, Benjamin Bryant, located in Helena, Montana. Legal documentation under review. While administrative procedures continued, Hendricks prepared the legal file for submission to the federal court in Arizona. She had to prove the integrity of the chain of custody from 1984 to 2019, a complex process as evidence item E4784 had passed through multiple storage phases. Every seal, opening record, and test result was photographed and signatures verified. Her final report was 147 pages long, with all DNA data and identity documents attached. On October 10th, the FBI completed the final authentication, signed by the Deputy Regional Director, and forwarded to the U.S. Department of Justice. The Bryant file status was updated one last time in the NDIS database. Resolved. Biological identity confirmed, living subject. This officially ended nearly 3 decades of missing under unknown circumstances. Legally, the case entered the closure phase. Re-verification of identity, reissuance of the original birth certificate, adjustment of Benjamin Bryant's civil records, and formal declaration of Alice Myers as the sole lawful kidnapping suspect. Inside the cold case unit, Hendricks watched the new line appear on the system screen. Case closed. Identified September 2019. She knew she had just witnessed a historic moment when a child missing for over 35 years was finally found, not through memory or hypothesis, but through the irrefutable evidence of genetics. From that moment, the Bryant case officially moved from missing to located, paving the way for the final stage, restoration of Benjamin's legal identity, and returning the case to its rightful place in Arizona investigative history. After the DNA results were confirmed, and the Bryant case was officially classified as victim identified, Detective Laura Hendricks moved to the final investigative step, completing the legal file regarding suspect Alice Myers. She began by re-examining the complete 1997 death file, including the death certificate, medical records, and autopsy report. The original document from the Nevada Department of Health stated, Alice Louise Myers, born 1945, died September 14, 1997, at Reno Regional Hospital, cause of death, congestive heart failure, chronic heart disease. There were no suspicious circumstances or request for forensic autopsy. Hendricks contacted the hospital for detailed records and discovered that at the time of death, Alice was admitted alone, with no family present. Her husband, William Myers, signed as next of kin, but died 2 years later of lung cancer, leaving no one able to provide direct testimony about Alice's final years. In the inpatient records, Hendricks found a notable detail, The treating physician noted the patient frequently mentioned fear of being found and expressed concern for her son, whom she believed would never fully understand the past. Though lacking legal weight, Hendricks regarded this note as indirect evidence of Alice's awareness of her past actions. The medical file also included an unsent note found in her purse, scrawled in pencil, "If anyone reads this, please forgive me. I did wrong because I couldn't bear the emptiness." The short 8-line note mentioned no specific names, but when cross-referenced with 1983 psychological records, Hendricks interpreted it as a belated confession, reflecting a grief-driven motive for the kidnapping. To complete the file, she forwarded all documents to the Arizona State Prosecutor and the FBI to assess possible accomplices, particularly William Myers's role. After 3 weeks reviewing bank records, travel, and transactions, the conclusion was, no evidence indicates active participation or awareness from William Myers. All financial records suggest passive cohabitation without complicity. Neighbors in Helena, who had lived near the Myers, all described William as quiet, regularly employed, and socially withdrawn. One neighbor said, "He treated Alice like the center of his universe, never argued, just did whatever she wanted." Based on the evidence gathered, the cold case unit determined there was insufficient basis to conclude William Myers knew about the kidnapping, as all adoption paperwork was administratively legal at the time. The consolidated report dated October 15, 2019, concluded, no surviving accomplice identified. Primary suspect deceased. Legal responsibility retained posthumously for record accuracy. Following standard procedure, Hendricks coordinated with the state prosecutor and FBI for official case classification. The charge category was determined as kidnapping, interstate transport of minor, but the legal status was recorded as suspect deceased, case closed by identification. All documents related to Alice Myers were archived as an appendix to the main file under code hash 840717ALC. With the note, "Offender deceased prior to discovery, no prosecution possible." Hendricks wrote a summary report stating the case no longer involved active criminal elements, but should be retained as a record of decades-long investigative effort. She also recommended sending copies of the conclusions to the Arizona Investigative Training Center for use as study material on psychologically motivated abductions. One of the rare classic cases decoded through a combination of historical records and modern DNA technology. Hendricks's report described Alice's criminal process as follows. Psychological motivation consistent with grief-induced abduction. Subject fabricated legal documents, transported minor across multiple states, and sustained deception for over a decade until death. No evidence of trafficking, abuse, or further criminal activity. The FBI agreed with the conclusion and closed the file under closed non-prosecutable. On October 22, 2019, the final minutes were signed by representatives of the FBI Tucson Field Office, Arizona DPS, and the Cold Case Unit. The last line read, "Official classification kidnapping, deceased suspect. Victim, located alive. Case closed administratively." When Hendricks saw the red stamp on the cover of the file, she understood that the 35-year journey from a small yard in Yuma to a cold office in Phoenix had finally come to an end. Alice Myers, the woman who in desperation carried a child away from the Arizona desert, was now just a name in the closed case index. But the case bearing her name had become a symbol for an entire generation of investigators, where justice arrived not from a courtroom verdict, but from the persistence of data, memory, and the belief that truth, however late, can still be found. On November 5, 2019, 3 weeks after the Cold Case Unit finalized the Alice Myers file, the FBI and Arizona Department of Public Safety officially announced the resolution of the Benjamin Bryant case in a closed press conference at the Phoenix headquarters. The event took place in a small 7th-floor conference room, attended only by selected media representatives, members of the investigative team, and a few Justice Beat reporters. On the table stood a large sign with white lettering, "Solved Cold Case, hash 840717. The FBI Tucson director read the statement. After 35 years, thanks to genetic genealogy technology and coordination among federal, state, and local agencies, the disappearance of 2-year-old Benjamin Bryant in Yuma County, 1984, has been resolved and closed. The victim is currently living safely under an adjusted legal identity. He paused for a few seconds, then continued. Investigative findings conclude the primary suspect was Alice Myers, deceased in 1997. The case is classified kidnapping, deceased suspect. No accomplices or organized criminal elements were identified. Following the statement, Detective Laura Hendricks briefly outlined the case-breaking process, reanalysis of evidence, E4784. Identification of Alice Myers' DNA chain, gene-linked genealogy comparison, and matching with David Myers' sample. She emphasized that every piece of evidence was independently verified by the FBI and Federal Forensic Laboratory. When the screen displayed images of the case file through the decades, the 1984 crime scene map, the composite sketch of the blonde woman, metal container E4784, and finally the words "Case Closed, 2019." The room fell silent. The summary press release issued the same day by Arizona DPS stated clearly, Case #840717, Benjamin Bryant, previously missing since June 1984, identified through DNA match with David Myers, Helena, Montana. Classification: solved cold case. Legal disposition: closed, non-prosecutable. Immediately after the press conference, the file was removed from the active cold case category and entered into the National Archive System under standard resolved case management procedures. A new code was assigned, NCCF SC 2019-08401717, meaning National Cold Case File, solved. All original paper documents, physical evidence, crime scene photos, witness statements, and technical reports were digitized and preserved in 2 hard copy sets. One set was sent to the National Archives in Washington, D.C. The other remained at the Arizona State Archives Center in Phoenix. The transfer document, signed November 12, noted, "File transferred to National Archives for preservation and educational reference. Retention, permanent." In Yuma, the local police department received a copy of the final report, along with a thank you letter from the State Department of Justice for decades of steadfast evidence preservation that enabled resolution through next-generation technology. In the basement old log book, the handwritten entry "Unsolved, Missing Juvenile," next to #840717, was crossed out in red ink and replaced with "Solved, 2019." In the NDIS system, Benjamin Bryant's DNA profile status was updated to located identity confirmed and switched to automatic privacy protection. The case was officially removed from the active missing persons list. In Phoenix, Hendricks signed the final minutes, closing her 4-year reinvestigation. The comprehensive report exceeded 200 pages and ended with the line, "Cold Case #840717. Resolved through genetic and documentary evidence. Stored permanently as precedent." After signing, she looked at the office screen displaying closed files count 1. It was a small number among thousands of unsolved cases, but it carried symbolic meaning for the entire Arizona investigative system, proof that even seemingly hopeless files can still be illuminated through persistence and scientific progress. That same week, the FBI sent official letters to the National Archives and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, requesting the Bryant case be added to the Solved Cold Case Archive. The confirmation reply dated November 18 stated, "Case data received and integrated into National Solved Registry, reference code 2-019-08401717. Internal Justice Community Bulletins describe the Bryant case as a symbol of investigator tenacity and the value of evidence preservation. After more than 30 years, the story of a child lost in an Arizona desert wind in 1984 had become teaching material on genetic genealogy. On November 20, 2019, the Arizona Cold Case Unit held a small office ceremony where Hendricks was awarded the Meritorious Service Badge. The final image on the screen was white text on black, "Case closed, Benjamin Bryant located. 2019. Beneath it were the digital signatures of the FBI, Arizona Department of Public Safety, and Yuma Police Department. 3 final seals closing a 35-year case, now officially part of U.S. criminal investigative history. After the Bryant case was announced closed at the federal level and transferred to the solved cold case category, the last remaining step was direct sibling DNA confirmation between Beth Bryant and the man identified as Benjamin Bryant, currently named David Myers. Per post-investigation protocol, the FBI recommended an independent sibling DNA test to strengthen the legal file before the Arizona justice system officially reissued the birth certificate. On December 3, 2019, Beth was invited to the Phoenix Forensic Laboratory, where she provided blood and buccal swab samples. At the same time, Benjamin, still using the name David Myers for civil purposes, was escorted by FBI Montana to the Federal Center in Helena for identical sampling. Both samples were separately sealed and sent to Quantico for parallel analysis against the original 2001 reference profiles. Less than a week later, the results were returned to the Arizona Cold Case Unit. Sibling DNA match probability 99.999999%. Result confirmed full biological siblings. Hendricks held the report and read each line slowly. After nearly 4 months since reopening the investigation, the case was scientifically complete, with no remaining doubt. The report was immediately forwarded to the State Department of Justice to finalize legal identity restoration. Per the coordinated plan between the FBI and Arizona DPS, the Bryant family reunion would be held privately at the state investigative headquarters in Phoenix, attended by legal representatives, psychological counselors, and justice media staff for documentation purposes. On the morning of December 15, 2019, an FBI vehicle stopped in front of the glass building on North Central Avenue, where people who had lived in 2 different worlds prepared to meet again. Beth Bryant, now 40 years old, stood in the lobby with her mother, Eileen Bryant, 71, small in stature, completely silver-haired, but with the same determined eyes of a mother who had never stopped searching. When the door opened, a man entered wearing a light blue shirt, tall, his face both unfamiliar and familiar. For the first few seconds, no one spoke. Hendricks stood behind holding the file but quietly stepped back, leaving the space between them to do the work of time. Beth stepped forward first. She reached out, then stopped halfway, tears streaming before her hand touched his shoulder. "Are you really Ben?" she whispered, her voice trembling so much it was barely audible. He nodded, eyes red, and answered softly, "That's what they say, and I believe it." Eileen walked up, her aged hands trembling as they touched his cheeks. In that moment, no test was needed. Every feature confirmed it. The eyes, the jawline, the small mole on the right side of his neck, details that could not be faked. The mother collapsed against her son's shoulder, her hoarse crying no longer that of pain, but of something greater, return beyond reason. The room was completely silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning and choked sobs. Hendricks left the room, allowing the counselors and FBI representatives to facilitate continued contact. In the internal record of the meeting, the counselor noted, "Subject David's Benjamin displayed emotional restraint initially, then progressive acknowledgement of identity, reunion completed successfully." After 35 years, the encounter lasted over 2 hours, most of it spent in silence. No one had enough words to fill the empty decades. As he stepped outside, Benjamin looked at the midday sun shining on the Phoenix desert and said quietly, "I feel like I've just been born again." The FBI later held a closed meeting with all parties to sign the identity confirmation minutes. On December 20th, the Arizona Department of Justice issued the decision, Reinstatement of Birth Identity, restoring the original birth certificate in the name of Benjamin Thomas Bryant, born March 12, 1980, son of Thomas and Eileen Bryant, resident of Yuma, Arizona. A copy was handed directly to Eileen in a sealed envelope bearing a red stamp. When she opened it, she looked for only a few seconds, then placed it on the table and covered her face with both hands. Beth sat beside her, gripping her mother's shoulder. Benjamin, the man who had carried the name David Myers for 35 years, stood still, as if unable to fully grasp the weight of that small piece of paper. For him, real memories of Yuma were hazy fragments, but now that past had legal form, a life returned to where it began. The FBI's year-end 2019 internal bulletin stated, "Reunion of Bryant family completed under supervision. Legal identification reissued. Subject relocated voluntarily under biological name." The Arizona Cold Case Unit archived all reunion photos as supplemental file hash 840717R19, family reunion record, with the final note, for the first time since 1984, all members of the Bryant family are accounted for. As night fell over Phoenix, Laura Hendricks left the office carrying the last folder. Inside was a single blank sheet, on which she wrote a few lines and folded. June 1984, that boy disappeared. December 2019, he was found. A circle closed. That was the administrative end of a case, but the beginning of another story, the story of a man returning from the void of memory, and a family that learned to live again in the light of truth. 3 weeks after the private Bryant family reunion in Phoenix, the Arizona state authorities, together with the FBI and the Yuma Police Department, held a public press conference about a case regarded as one of the longest-running cold cases ever solved in the state's history. On the morning of January 10, 2020, the press room at the Arizona Department of Public Safety was packed with reporters. On the podium, a green backdrop displayed white lettering, "Solved, the Bryant Case, 1984-2019. The Tucson FBI field office director opened by thanking every unit involved in the investigation, from the crime lab and cold case unit to the GeneLink laboratory that performed the genetic genealogy analysis. He read each sentence clearly. After 35 years, Benjamin Bryant, the 2-year-old boy who disappeared in Yuma in 1984, has been located alive and reunited with his family. The case has been closed as a single-act abduction committed by suspect Alice Myers, deceased in 1997. Beside him, a cold case unit representative projected a series of images, the original crime scene, evidence item E4784, a map of the route from Yuma, Blythe, Utah, Montana, and finally, a 2019 photograph of Benjamin with his sister Beth and mother Eileen. That photo became the iconic image of the press conference, 3 people standing in the dim light of the Arizona desert, bridging 2 generations separated by time. Immediately after the law enforcement statements, national media outlets ran the story simultaneously. The Associated Press headline read, "Missing Arizona Boy Found Alive." After 35 years, USA Today, The Washington Post, and NBC News all carried detailed reports that highlighted genetic genealogy technology and the persistence of Arizona investigators. Television networks repeatedly aired footage from the Phoenix reunion, showing Eileen embracing her son after more than 3 decades. On social media, thousands of comments shared the story with intense emotion, calling it a miracle of science and faith. Many Arizona residents, especially in Yuma, where the case began, expressed a desire to hold a memorial, not for someone who had died, but for the years that had been lost. Yuma's mayor at the time, Carol Ruiz, signed an order permitting a community event at Pioneer Park, the very park where Benjamin had played the day he vanished. On January 18th, under a lightly sunny sky, the ceremony took place with more than 200 residents, retired police officers, and cold case unit representatives in attendance. In the center of the park, a small bronze plaque was erected bearing the words, "For every missing child, never forgotten." Below that, in honor of the Bryant family, whose hope endured. The entire Bryant family was present. Eileen, now frail and in a wheelchair, was assisted by officers to the front row. When the memorial bell rang, she held tightly to Beth's and Benjamin's hands. There were no long speeches, just a minute of silence that lasted exactly 84 seconds, symbolizing the year of the abduction. Afterward, the city presented Hendricks and her team with the Citizens Service Award for closing a case many thought would remain forever unsolved. On stage, Hendricks said simply, "We were only connecting pieces that time had scattered. The truth was there from the beginning. It only required enough patience to find it." Her words were quoted in dozens of articles the next morning. In Yuma, people say that for years, whenever the name Bryant was mentioned, residents would look at each other with a mixture of sadness and fear. Now, with the story closed by a real ending, that fear has turned into a form of trust that justice may be slow but it is not lost. A group of local high school students even painted a new artwork titled "The Return to Yuma," depicting a little boy standing before the golden desert holding a toy truck with a broken wheel. The painting was placed on display in the city library alongside the original 1984 news clippings. At the end of the memorial, as the crowd dispersed, Eileen remained seated alone in the sunlight. Benjamin stood behind her, saying nothing, just resting his hand on her shoulder. Nothing more needed to be explained. They could not recover the 35 years that were lost, but they could live the rest of their lives with the full truth. In the Arizona DPS archives, a copy of the certificate Solved Cold Case #840717 was sealed, along with the family reunion photo. On the edge of the file folder, an archivist handwritten a single line, "Yuma remembers." 3 short words, but enough to close a long chapter in the memory of the entire state. A case that had begun in despair and ended in the light of perseverance and humanity. After the Bryant case was made public, and the Yuma memorial concluded, the file quickly moved beyond the scope of a local investigation to become a national case study in genetic genealogy investigation in the United States. Just 3 months after the official press conference, the Federal Office of Forensic Science and the FBI selected the Bryant case as a teaching model for the Special Training Program, Advanced Cold Case Investigation and Genetic Forensics for Federal Investigators. The fully digitized file, coded case reference G1984, Yuma, was incorporated into coursework at the FBI Academy in Quantico and the National Center for Forensic Science in Huntsville. In the training materials, the Bryant case was presented as a historic turning point, demonstrating how the combination of classic investigative work and DNA technology can close decades-old cases without requiring a living suspect. The investigative model was divided into 3 standard phases: evidence preservation, genealogical analysis, direct confirmation matching. Hendricks, the lead detective on the Bryant case, was invited to teach in the program's inaugural session in the fall of 2020. She detailed the entire process, from recovering evidence item E4784 in the Arizona State Archives, matching the old DNA to the NDIS database, to linking with GeneLink to identify the genetic family branch that led to the man in Montana. She emphasized that the most critical factor was not the technology itself, but integrity and evidence preservation, because if even one small fiber from 1984 had been lost, the Bryant case would never have been solved. Following her lecture, the FBI officially made this principle a mandatory training standard in the cold case curriculum. Preservation precedes progress. Hendricks' phrase was printed on the first page of the manual. In 2021, the American Academy of Forensic Sciences published a special report titled Legacy Cases and Genetic Linkage, in which the Bryant case was cited as an exemplary instance of integrating genetic data, traditional forensic records, and interagency cooperation. The report stated, "The Bryant case proves that evidence does not merely survive time, it evolves with technology, provided the system knows how to preserve and remains ready to update." As a result, the FBI launched the pilot program Project Reconnect, using the same model to re-examine 1,200 pre-1990 missing persons cases nationwide. By the end of the first year, 87 files were reopened, and 12 victims were identified using the same genealogical method applied in the Bryant case. Specialty media called this the Bryant effect, the phenomenon whereby one solved case became a catalyst that changed how the entire American justice system views DNA data. At the state level, Arizona issued new regulations requiring every local police department to review and update old evidence storage, creating standardized digital catalogs ready for modern reanalysis. The regulation, issued in August 2020, was named the Bryant Preservation Directive and carried the slogan, "No piece of evidence is too small to keep." Legally, the Federal Department of Justice amended 18 U.S.C. Section 3299 to remove the statute of limitations for interstate child abduction offenses, allowing posthumous or future prosecution if a suspect is still alive. Although Alice Myers had long been deceased, the Bryant case was repeatedly cited during Senate Judiciary Committee discussions as the quintessential example of the value of dormant files and the possibility of re-prosecution through genetic data. At the same time, the forensic science community recognized it as a milestone proving the power of the NDIS database when linked to commercial platforms like GeneLink. In 2022, the American Academy of Forensic Sciences awarded the Forensic Innovation Award to the joint FBI GeneLink research team for the project Integrated Genetic Genealogy and Cold Case Solving, the Bryant Framework. Hendricks attended the ceremony representing the Arizona team and said briefly, "We didn't just find one person, we restored an entire generation of investigators' faith that justice is never lost, only waiting for someone patient enough to knock." Additionally, the Bryant case helped drive new federal-state policy on biological data sharing. Previously, state forensic labs often kept DNA profiles in silos, causing delays in cross-matching. After Bryant, the FBI issued a mandatory linking protocol called the Cross-State Genetic Access Protocol, requiring real-time sharing of analysis results among southwestern states. This breakthrough led to the reactivation of numerous missing persons cases in California, Nevada, and New Mexico in 2021 alone. At national forensic conferences, the Bryant name is always mentioned as a symbol of the intersection between human emotion and the power of data. One veteran investigator remarked, "This was the first case where machines didn't just help find the truth, they helped heal what people had lost." To this day, in the archives at FBI Quantico, the Bryant file is among the 12 cases classified as milestones in the evolution of modern criminal investigation. On the spine of the electronic file is a note, 1984, the beginning, 2019, the lesson. And on the final page of the teaching document, beneath Hendricks' signature, the concluding line reads, "From a backyard in Yuma to the archives of Quantico, the Bryant case redefined what it means for justice to endure." Once the Bryant case was legally closed and recognized as a national investigative model, the hardest part began in the private lives of those involved, especially Benjamin Bryant, the man who had lived as David Myers for more than 35 years. When the case file was sealed, he had to face a completely new reality. He was not the person he had always believed himself to be. Following post-investigation support protocol, the FBI arranged long-term psychological counseling for Benjamin at the Phoenix Behavioral Health Center. In the early sessions, he barely spoke. Clinicians noted in his file, subject exhibits identity dissonance and memory fragmentation. He could not connect his childhood memories to what the records described. The image of the blonde woman he had called Mom was now replaced by the cold legal term suspect. In one therapy session, Benjamin admitted he did not remember Eileen's real face, only a vague feeling that he had once heard that voice in a distant dream. Treatment lasted nearly 8 months and focused on rebuilding personal identity. The psychologist had him keep a journal with 2 columns labeled David and Benjamin. The first column recorded what he remembered: elementary school in Montana, a quiet foster father, weekend fishing trips. The second recorded what he was learning to accept: his hometown of Yuma, his biological mother, the sister who had searched for him half her life. "If you write long enough," the doctor said, "the 2 names will gradually merge into one." By the end of 2020, Benjamin legally changed his name back to Benjamin Thomas Bryant, though he kept the signature David on some documents as a way to honor the life he had lived. He chose to stay in Phoenix, working at a computer repair center and living quietly, avoiding the media. In his final follow-up report, The doctor wrote, "Subject shows gradual stabilization, accepting dual identity as continuity, not conflict." He continued meeting Beth weekly, awkward conversations at first that slowly became routine. She told him about the years the family had endured, the old house in Yuma, their father who died of heart disease, summers when no one spoke his name, but his childhood bicycle remained untouched in the garage. After the reunion, Beth seemed to find new purpose in helping others. She contacted the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and joined their Family Advocates program, where survivors of loss share experiences and support families with missing children. In March 2021, Beth became an official volunteer counselor, running an online support group for parents still waiting for news of their children. In her first introductory post, she wrote, "I lived 35 years in the space between loss and hope. I may not be able to help anyone find their child, but I can help them not lose faith." That statement was featured in an NMEC internal newsletter under the headline, "Hope Sustained, the Bryant Legacy." In Phoenix, Eileen, their mother, moved in with Beth. Her health continued to decline, but her spirit grew steadier than before. In a local interview, she said, "The greatest pain was not losing my child, but not knowing where he was. When he came back, even if only the remnants of memory remained, that pain was finally folded away." For Benjamin, the hardest adjustment was getting used to being called by his real name. Whenever someone said Ben, he still turned his head slowly, as if the name belonged to someone else. Part of the therapy involved a short return visit to Yuma. In 2021, Hendricks and a counselor arranged the trip. Standing in front of the old house, now owned by strangers, Benjamin was silent for a long time. He walked around the backyard, the spot the file called the last place the 2-year-old boy was seen, then whispered, "I don't remember, but it feels familiar." Therapists call this emotional memory, a form of recall that comes not through images, but through bodily response. After that trip, he began emailing Hendricks about his dreams, about fields of sand, about a silver truck speeding past. Every email ended with the same line, "Maybe I'm learning how to remember." In the 2022 Comprehensive Psychological Report, the specialist concluded, "Subject demonstrates adaptation through acceptance, not recovery. Identity reconstructed with emotional continuity rather than factual recall." Meanwhile, Beth became a familiar voice at national cold case conferences, speaking from the victim family perspective. She said the thing she was most grateful for was not the DNA technology, but one investigator who refused to give up. Speaking at a forensic conference in Denver, she told the audience, "If no one had believed our file still mattered, no amount of advanced technology would have turned data into anything but empty numbers." Her words brought tears to many in the room, including Hendricks. By this point, the Bryant story was no longer just a case. It had become a lesson in human resilience. Benjamin continues periodic therapy, but his life has gradually stabilized. Every weekend he visits his mother and sister. They eat dinner together, and they look through restored photos from the 1983 family album. In one picture, a 2-year-old boy is laughing, holding a red toy truck. Benjamin stares at it for a long time, then says quietly, "Maybe I don't remember, but I know I was happy once." For the entire Bryant family, those words are the sign that their long journey through loss is finally finding its way back to meaning. While the Bryant family gradually settled into their new life, and the main case was officially considered closed in the justice system, the Arizona Cold Case Unit continued to thoroughly review all archived documents to ensure no detail was overlooked. In May 2022, during the process of redigitizing physical evidence, a forensic technician from the state crime lab discovered an anomaly in the original file on the 1984 crime scene examination report. In addition to the gold fabric fiber sample coded E4784, there was a faint handwritten note that read partial latent print, unidentified male, truck door. This line had never been entered into the automated database because at that time, Arizona did not yet have the Digital Fingerprint Storage System AFIS. Upon receiving the report, Hendricks immediately requested the recovery of the original print from the old evidence vault in Yuma. 3 days later, the steel evidence box was opened. Inside was still the sealed paper envelope from 1984, labeled LAT084TRKR. The fingerprint had partially faded, but was still sufficient to be re-scanned using advanced 3D technology. The reconstruction results showed it was an adult male's fingerprint that did not match any samples in the records of either Alice or William Myers. The technical report sent to the cold case unit noted, possible secondary contact, right hand print, position indicates access to passenger door handle. This discovery forced Hendricks to call an emergency meeting with the FBI Tucson field office. After reviewing the files, the two agencies agreed to classify it as an unverified lead from the original case and to separate it into an independent subfile for continued investigation. On June 12, 2022, subfile #840-720 was officially opened, titled, Unidentified Male Print Associated with Vehicle, Possible Accomplice. The investigative focus centered on determining whether a second person had assisted Alice Myers in the abduction or in moving the child out of Arizona in 1984. Hendricks and the forensic investigation team reconstructed Alice's entire travel route from Yuma to Blythe, then through Utah and up to Montana, based on old gas receipts, motel records, and hospital receipts recovered from the original files. One detail stood out. At the Mojave Route 10 gas station, a receipt dated June 18, 1984, showed a cash payment with the handwritten signature R. Lee. No one by that name appeared in Alice's records. Hendricks asked the FBI to pull demographic data for the Mojave area from that period. The results revealed a man named Robert Lee, age 32, a freelance truck driver who had worked for a transport company in Blythe, lost contact in 1987, and was believed to have left the state. However, his military fingerprint record from 1970 did not fully match the sample found on the Ford truck, a similarity rate of only 78%, insufficient for legal value. The report noted, partial correlation, inconclusive. Despite this, Hendricks judged the lead worth pursuing because it aligned with the time and location context. She requested a broadened national search through CODIS and IAFIS for possible matches with individuals who had traffic, transportation, or vehicle storage offenses in the Southwest during the 1980s. The search lasted many months, but all results were negative. The fingerprint remained a lone piece of data among millions of records. In the October 2022 report, Hendricks wrote, "The possibility of a second person assisting the transportation process cannot be ruled out. However, there is currently no evidence confirming the existence of an active accomplice." The technical lab also considered the possibility that the print belonged to a tow truck operator or officer from 1984. But when cross-referencing the list of personnel present at the scene, no matches were found. Another point raised in the minutes, the fingerprint was located on the inside of the passenger door handle, indicating the person may have opened the door from inside the vehicle, not from the outside. Something that contradicted Alice's usual behavior of sitting in the driver's seat. A new hypothesis emerged that the man may have ridden with her during the initial leg out of Arizona and then departed. By November 2022, the FBI Tucson field office officially classified subfile #840-720 as active and under review, separating it from the closed Bryant main case. A small team was formed to continue searching for the identity of the unknown male print. Although Hendricks was no longer the lead investigator, she was invited to serve as a consultant. In the summary report, she wrote, "If there was a second person, they vanished before the world knew Benjamin had been kidnapped. And if there wasn't, that fingerprint is merely a historical shadow, reminding us that every story, even one with an ending, still has something left unsaid." The subfile continues to receive periodic updates, and remains an independent part of the Arizona cold case system under the status unresolved subfile, signifying that justice is sometimes not completely closed. There is always one detail, one trace, left among the yellowed pages of archived history. After subfile hash 840720 was reopened and the new investigation team began reviewing technical details, the Arizona Department of Public Safety conducted a comprehensive evaluation of the entire Bryant case process from the 1984 disappearance to its resolution in 2019. The purpose of this report was to draw professional lessons and establish standard procedures for similar missing child cases in the future. The evaluation team was led by Deputy Director of State Police Raymond Collier and included cold case experts, forensic analysts, FBI representatives, and veteran officers who had served during the case's early phase. The report opened with the assessment. The Bryant case is a typical example of the limitations of 1980s investigative work, when inter-county coordination systems and forensic technology had not yet reached a level capable of responding quickly to child abductions. The analysis of the initial failure was divided into three main categories. First, delayed response time. Records show that Yuma police took more than 90 minutes to dispatch a patrol unit to the scene after Eileen Bryant reported her son missing, partly due to the lack of a priority classification mechanism for child missing calls, and partly because regulations at the time considered disappearances of less than 24 hours insufficient grounds to open an investigation. This delay caused the complete loss of the critical golden hour, the most important period for gathering clues about the direction of travel. Second, lack of interagency coordination. Once the case crossed Yuma County lines, there was no mechanism for data sharing or synchronized alerts among neighboring states. An internal 1984 report revealed that information about the silver Ford F-150 was transmitted to Imperial County Sheriff's Office only after 3 days, and by the time it reached California Highway Patrol, traffic camera data had already been overwritten. Without a unified lead agency, each unit handled only its own piece without an overall picture. Third, limitations of forensic technology. At that time, DNA testing did not yet exist in criminal investigations. Fingerprint, fiber, and evidence analysis were all manual and depended more on individual skill than standardized procedure. Evidence E-40-784 was preserved only because of one local officer's diligence, not because of mandatory regulation. The report stated clearly, had the evidence been destroyed under the then standard 10-year storage cycle, the Bryant case would have remained forever unsolved. After identifying the causes, the evaluation team proposed a new set of 6 core operational standards. 1. Establish a 60-minute response mechanism requiring every local police agency to have a rapid response team for child missing calls, regardless of time of day. 2. Create automatic inter-county alert linkage, the precursor to today's Amber Alert system, to disseminate information within 2 hours of receiving a report, eliminating the need for manual approvals. 3. Standardize evidence collection and sealing procedures in all missing person cases, even without signs of crime, including 360-degree scene photography, biological sampling, and minimum 30-year storage. Mandate federal data sharing and create an open repository for unsolved missing person cases that can connect to commercial DNA and genealogical databases such as GeneLink or 23andMe. 5. Provide psychological training for victims' families to ensure initial interviews do not cause trauma, while establishing a single communication channel between police and family to prevent misinformation. 6. Establish a dedicated cold case unit responsible for periodic review of unsolved cases after 5 years to prevent files from being forgotten. These recommendations were compiled into a document titled Bryant Operational Review Report, BOR 2022, and sent to the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice. In its conclusion, the report emphasized the Bryant case is not only proof of the power of DNA technology, but also a warning about human limitations in the early stages of investigation. Had just one of the 3 factors, response, coordination, preservation, been executed correctly, the outcome could have arrived decades earlier. Afterward, the Arizona Department of Public Safety organized a professional workshop called the Bryant Standard, using the original errors as training scenarios for new investigators. At the opening session, Hendricks was invited to speak. Technology lets us look back at the past, but procedure ensures we do not repeat it. Her words were incorporated into official training materials and became the motto of the modern cold case program. The final report closed with the line, "The responsibility of the investigative profession is not only to find the lost, but to ensure the next generation does not have to repeat mistakes that made justice wait 35 years. After the Bryant Operational Review Report, BOR 2022 was issued, and its recommendations officially approved. The ripple effects of the Bryant case quickly spread throughout Arizona's criminal justice system. Within just 2 years, from 2022 to the end of 2023, 6 other cold cases in Maricopa, Yuma, Coconino, and Cochise counties were solved by applying the same genetic genealogy investigative model. The Arizona Department of Public Safety called this the Bryant Cluster, the first group of cases resolved under the new genetic protocol. The first was file hash 910236, the 1991 disappearance of 19-year-old Lila Morrison in Pima County while walking home from school. A hair sample preserved in the original file was reanalyzed and matched a man in New Mexico who had a prior conviction in 1992. When police followed up, the suspect had already died, but DNA comparison showed a 99.98% match, identifying the perpetrator and closing the case after more than 3 decades. Just 3 months later, the second case, hash 880411, involving a 10-year-old boy who vanished in Coconino, was also solved using the same technique when the boy's recovered shirt yielded DNA from a person arrested for abuse in 1990. Subsequent cases in Maricopa, Yavapai, and Cochise counties all shared the same pattern. Evidence once thought worthless regained decisive value when fed into the new genetic genealogy system. The FBI announced that of the 6 solved cases, 5 involved deceased suspects, with only 1 still living perpetrator, prosecuted in 2023. Internal statistics showed the average investigation time per case dropped from 14 years to under 9 months from the start of genealogical analysis, a figure hailed as a generational leap in cold case history. A specialized report from Arizona DPS noted, "From the Bryant case onward, every solved case does not merely close a file, it confirms the viability of genetic genealogy as the primary investigative tool of the 21st century." At the same time, the FBI, in coordination with the U.S. Department of Justice, launched the National Genealogical Integration Program, NGIP, the first federal-level genetic genealogy data sharing initiative. The goal was to connect each state's independent databases to a central system in Quantico for real-time cross-access. Arizona was one of the 4 pilot states, along with California, Washington, and Texas. Each state received funding to build digital storage centers and was required to upload all local forensic DNA data into NGIP. The program's first pilot report, released in November 2023, revealed that Arizona alone submitted 423 unidentified evidence samples to the federal network, of which 47 produced potential positive matches with individuals or biological relatives nationwide. Experts called this the second wave of investigative genetics, a phase where data flows as a unified stream rather than being fragmented by state borders. NGIP Director Rachel Quintero stated, "In the past, justice was often limited by borders. Now data knows no state lines. Thanks to the system, many seemingly unrelated minor cases began linking into chains, helping map cross-state criminal travel patterns." A notable example was Tucson case hash 790664, reopened after a suspect's DNA matched a 1982 Nevada case, leading to confirmation of a single perpetrator for both crimes, the first multi-state case resolution in the Southwest. From 2022 to mid-2024, more than 2,100 Arizona cold case files were rescanned with the new algorithm. 138 were reopened, and 19 were classified, solved, or identified. All traced their breakthrough to the genealogical technology first proven in the Bryant case. Forensic Science Review published a special issue titled The Bryant Legacy and the Expansion of Genetic Justice, describing how Arizona became a pioneer in the field and documenting the dramatic reduction in investigation timelines from decades to under a year. At the congressional level, the U.S. Judiciary Committee cited the Bryant effect during 2023 budget discussions, leading to passage of the Federal Genetic Access Act, allowing states unrestricted access to NGIP without case-by-case approval. At the signing ceremony, the Attorney General declared, "From one old file in Yuma in 1984, America has built an entire network of genetic justice." The Arizona Cold Case Unit, previously just 12 people, expanded to 40 staff members divided into 3 specialized teams: DNA processing, genealogy analysis, and victim travel reconstruction. Hendricks, now the state's Deputy Director of Forensics, spoke at the opening of the new Phoenix Center. "Every case we solve is a door opened by the Bryant case. It does not just find the lost. It makes us re-examine how we work, how we store evidence, and how we trust data." Those words were engraved on the main hallway wall beneath shining metal letters that read, "Genetic Justice, from Arizona to America." There, the Bryant case was no longer just a private memory of Yuma. It had become the foundation for an entirely new justice system, one in which cases once thought forever silent are now given voice again through the language of science and human persistence. Even though the next 6 cold cases were successfully resolved, and the NGIP system became a symbol of investigative progress, there remained a shadow that had not been fully illuminated, one directly tied to the Bryant case. During the review of auxiliary file #840720, analysts uncovered additional details suggesting that Alice Myers may not have acted alone when she abducted Benjamin in 1984. Specifically, among the receipts and travel documents collected after the case was closed, 2 payment receipts, one from a rest stop in Blythe and one in St. George, were signed in 2 distinctly different handwritings. One was clearly labeled A. Myers, while the other was scribbled A. Men, but the final signature differed markedly in pen pressure and slant. The Arizona DPS Handwriting Examination Lab conducted a comparative analysis and concluded, likely written by a person of the opposite sex at the same approximate time, but insufficient basis to identify the individual, is to proceed, one essai de difference no. Additionally, archived data from the California Department of Motor Vehicles revealed that the Ford F-150 Alice used when leaving Yuma was not registered in her name, but rather belonged to an anonymous male owner, temporarily registered in Riverside County only 6 months before the abduction. The vehicle owner's records no longer existed in the electronic system due to expired retention periods, but a handwritten receipt fragment in the old paper file caught the investigator's attention: "Vehicle temporarily registered for adoption transport." That phrase made Hendricks and the forensic specialists pause. After cross-referencing national records, the phrase was found to have been used in the 1980s by certain unlicensed intermediary groups that transported children across state lines to sell to families seeking to adopt without legal process, a practice known as the Gray Adoption Network. Although there was no concrete evidence that Alice was part of this network, her travel pattern from Arizona to California, through Utah, and finally stopping in Montana, matched the routes these intermediaries commonly used to evade social service oversight. An internal FBI Tucson report from March 2024 stated clearly, "It is possible Alice Myers received assistance from an individual or intermediary organization in leaving Arizona and legitimizing the child's birth certificate. However, current evidence is insufficient to conclude the existence of an organized criminal network." The lab also discovered in Alice's 1983 Fresno hospital records, where she was treated after a miscarriage, a note: "Patient received psychological support from a single women's counseling group. contact arranged through the intermediary organization Adoption Outreach California. When corporate records were checked, that organization had been founded in 1982 but was dissolved in 1986 amid suspicions of violating adoption procedures. All administrative records were destroyed following a civil lawsuit, leaving no data to verify. Hendricks, compiling the details, wrote in his report to the FBI, "The possibility cannot be ruled out that Alice was guided or assisted in creating false documents and concealing her movements. Indicators point to the involvement of at least one individual knowledgeable in administrative procedures who intervened in the birth registration process." Nevertheless, when the FBI contacted the Montana Department of Social Services, which issued David Meyer's 1985 birth certificate, only copies of the documents remained on file, with no record of who submitted them. The certifying midwife's signature read Dr. Jade Holman, but investigation revealed no licensed practitioner by that name in the state at the time. An elderly doctor formerly practicing in the Helena area told investigators that in the 80s, many children were recorded as home births to avoid red tape. Sometimes just a handwritten note was enough. Those statements thickened the layer of suspicion that Benjamin's abduction may not have been purely the impulsive act of a psychologically disturbed woman, but rather part of a small chain of underground adoptions that existed across the southwestern United States between 1980 and 1986. However, because most individuals involved had died or disappeared, the FBI could not trace money trails or identify the organizing entity. The summary document labeled Appendix 0720B concluded, "Possible connection to illegal adoption network, unconfirmed." The final line of the report, handwritten by Hendricks in the margin, read, "Sometimes the truth isn't buried. It simply drifts beyond reach." Despite the lack of hard evidence, the suspicion continued to occupy investigators for many months afterward. Some independent experts even suggested that the unidentified fingerprint in auxiliary file hash 840720 might belong to the intermediary who provided Alice the vehicle, an individual once active in the now-vanished Gray adoption network. By the end of 2024, the auxiliary file remained classified as under investigation. No direct evidence. Though the Bryant case is regarded as a symbol of genetic justice, it still left gaps that could not be filled. Shadows of a once silent social system in which tiny lives were sometimes traded across state lines, only emerging into view decades later when technology grew strong enough to reveal faint traces among time-yellowed pages. In June 2025, exactly 41 years after Benjamin Bryant vanished from the backyard of a small house in Yuma, case file hash 840717 was officially transferred to the United States National Archives. The original file, over 2,000 pages thick, contained every investigative report, scanned physical evidence, forensic transcripts, witness statements, and supplemental appendices, including DNA records, reunion certifications, and the final Bryant Operational Review Report, BOR 2022. It is stored in the Special Archives section at College Park, Maryland, reserved for cold cases solved through genetic genealogy. On the spine of the binder, a red stamp stands out, Solved Cold Case, Bryant, Benjamin, along with an electronic retrieval code linked to the NGIP system. That same year, the U.S. Department of Justice issued a commendation recognizing the achievements of the Arizona Department of Public Safety and its Cold Case Unit, awarding the rare collective honor Meritorious Service in Forensic Advancement for a team that helped reshape the foundation of national investigative practice. The ceremony took place in Washington, D.C., attended by representatives from the FBI, the National Institute of Justice, and officers from many other states who came to study the Bryant model. In his speech, the FBI director said, "From a small backyard in Yuma, Arizona, we have rewritten the definition of justice. It may remain silent for decades, but it never loses the trail." Hendricks, the former lead investigator, was invited on stage to receive a steel-engraved memento. In recognition of persistence, science, and humanity, she spoke briefly. "Legally, this case is closed, but humanely, it remains forever open. After the ceremony, the Bryant file was added to the National Archives' rotating exhibition program titled Justice Through Time, alongside historic cases such as the Golden State Killer and Green River. Visitors can view digital copies of evidence item E4784 and the Bryant family reunion photograph under the caption "Missing Child Found After 61 Years." The number 61 represents the total time from disappearance until the complete file was finalized and archived nationally, a symbol of the long journey from error to restoration taken by the justice system itself. American media called it the case that taught time patience. The Bryant story became official teaching material at justice academies and was incorporated into the curriculum of both the FBI Academy and the National Institute of Justice. The final summary in the file reads simply, Benjamin Bryant. Located alive 2019. Identity restored 2020. Case preserved 2025. Those few lines encapsulate 3 generations of effort, from the first responding officers in Yuma in 1984, to Hendricks and the Arizona cold case team, to the forensic scientists at Quantico, who proved that data can outlive the limits of time itself. The Bryant family, after everything, chose a quiet life in the Phoenix suburbs. Beth continues her work counseling victims' families, while Benjamin, now in his 40s, still avoids the press. In a rare local television interview, he said, "I don't remember the past, but I know people never gave up on me. Maybe justice sometimes arrives not to punish, but to bring people back together." That quote was reprinted on the cover page of the final NARA report. When the archivists sealed the steel box containing the Bryant file, they affixed one last small label in the corner, Yuma, Arizona. The beginning of genetic justice. In that place, what was once tragedy has become a milestone in American forensic history, where a child thought lost forever became living proof that any loss can be recovered if people simply refuse to stop searching for the truth. The story of the Benjamin Bryant case is not only a journey of solving crime through science, it is also a mirror reflecting the core values of modern American society: faith in justice, the power of technology, and the steadfastness of the human spirit. When a missing child is found after more than 6 decades, it is not merely an achievement of DNA investigation, it is proof that America remains committed to the principle that no one is ever truly forgotten. The detail of evidence item E4784, a small yellow cloth fiber preserved for 30 years, reminds us that in every field, from forensics to daily life, even the tiniest thing can hold immense value if properly valued and preserved. The fact that Arizona's cold case unit never gave up after decades demonstrates the importance of perseverance, the very quality that created America's distinctive never stop searching culture. The lesson is not only for investigators, it is for every individual in today's world. Never be too quick to declare a relationship, a dream, or a belief missing, because sometimes, with enough patience and the right tools, truth or opportunity can still be found. In a society increasingly dominated by technology, the Bryant case reminds us that science only gains true meaning when guided by compassion. As Hendricks once said, justice doesn't come from data, it comes from the people who use it to heal. In today's America, where past and present intertwine inside every data file, the Bryant story encourages us to live more responsibly with information, with memory, and with one another. Because sometimes, persistence and humanity are the real justice. Thank you for joining us on the full journey of the Bryant case, where justice was found after more than half a century. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue accompanying us through more true stories of faith, memory, and cases that time once seemed to have buried forever.